The karakia. Lead the karakia.
Shall I begin?
Yeah, we'll wait for Victoria.
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. We'll get underway with the fourth day of our Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan hearings. Underway as usual with our lovely karakia. Grant, could you get us underway with that?
Yeah. Thank you. Whakakata ti hau ki te uru, whakaka ti hau ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki uta, kia matala ki tai, I hei aki ana ti atakura, I toi, I huka, I hauhu, hanga, ti hei mariua.
Thank you, Grant, and thank you, everyone. We do have one of our panel members stuck on a plane in Wellington in fog. Surprise, surprise, but we do need to acknowledge Kate Stiles, and just for formality, I'd like to receive an apology for lateness from Kate. We need a mover and a seconder to that. So Robbie moving, Nicole seconding. Those that approve that say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's all good. Thank you very much. So there's a couple of additional, just everyone, I think everyone's understanding we do have a declaration of interest schedule, which we're declaring any particular interests. So just in the last couple of days, there's been some additions. So Victoria have declared sort of a council interest in both the International Airport Company and also the Portal Limited Company. I'm satisfied that you've declared those and there are no conflicts that would cause you to need to stand down with those submissions. It's just a normal councillor declaration. Nicole, I think, given the declaration about Andrew McAllister's submission, we'll ask you to step aside when Alistair gives his submission, and also from any deliberations regarding his submission. So that's the way we'll declare. We'll have those, and Kathy, if you could just update the register itself,
I will.
including my management of those conflicts that have been declared. Panel, is everyone happy with that? Okay, thank you. We'll now move to the next item of business, which on my screen. Okay. So we are formally receiving today an addendum to the officers' report, and this covers some maps which have been prepared, which shows the recommended changes from the maps in the spatial plan, draft spatial plan, as it was recommended by staff when they prepared their officers' report. So thank you, staff, for that. We got that early in the week, but we're just formally receiving that. So again, I need a mover and a seconder to receive that information. Victoria and Gail seconding. Those that agree with that say aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you very much. All right. I think we should just get straight into things. If Paul is here, we'll get underway, and welcome to our hearing. And thank you for your submission, and thank you so much for coming in and talking to us. Thank you.
First of all, thank you all for your work. And I would say that I don't pretend to have a broad enough overview to make a judgment on the proposal. I sort of took it as read a little bit that had been put together by a competent process, and I haven't dived into the detail too much. So I'm just really here to make a minor point, and which is around the extents of the plan. And it's not an objective contribution. It comes from commercial interests, if you like. I'm grateful to some landholders in Dunsandel who have granted me options over a company that I direct options over their land, and it's a considerable holding asides the town there. And I've also in the past had an option on what we'll call the donut block, which is in the middle of Dunsandel, and been in negotiations also with Mr. Narkis, who's to the south of Dunsandel. So while I don't represent today those two latter holdings, I'm comfortable that the things I'll be saying would be appreciated by them, in terms of just trying to encourage you to consider extending the extents of your primary map to include Dunsandel. There was a attachment to my presentation. I don't know if you've all received it. Unfortunately, yes. It was a little bit lengthy. It hasn't been dragged out of rough draft and purposed for this. It was drafted for an appearance in the Selwyn District Plan Review, which didn't really come to fruition, but it does, if you can put aside that, it still contains solid information around Dunsandel and the advantages of including Dunsandel. I think the headlines there are that there's no municipal wastewater system, and that is the major handbrake out there. So if we want to add Dunsandel, we want to address that. So then we want to have a bit more land than just the donut block, so that we can pay for the municipal wastewater in an appropriate way. I've had 9 contractors review the likely solution, which is agreed by Selwyn Council as the preferred solution, which is just to run a pipe down from Dunsandel down, pretty much down the state highway to the Pines wastewater treatment plant. And while that is a major kind of transit route and there's a river crossing, I can just reassure you that once the right people are on the job, there's no fundamental problem to that project. There's nothing that should concern you in terms of, should we block this? I've spoken to some great consultants and it's all doable. The engineers can sort out the problems, and there's and I specifically address the river crossing, which is obviously could be a risky thing, but we can tack it to the bridge, for example, and you may be familiar with that river often being dry in the summer. So there's a lot of potential to do very minimal disturbance works in the summer, either to tack it to the side of the bridge or just run a trench. But I do think, from my extensive research into it, I think tacking it to the bridge is an easy option. So we can solve the wastewater perhaps 20 million would get us out there, and we'd always encourage them, wouldn't we? So yeah, if you extend the map, you will encourage that project, and if you don't, you won't.
Paul, I'm from Hawke's Bay, so I'm a little bit geographically challenged.
I do apologise.
I think is Dunsandel where the general store is, where you can stop and have a nice breakfast? Okay.
I do apologise, Chair.
No, that's good. I'm wondering whether we could just bring up, you've got some really good images in your presentation, whether we could actually, sorry, team, is that available to us or not? It's in the submission. I have to look at I'd like to ask.
If we were approaching Dunsandel from the south, the 50 hectare block is the last thing you'll see before the housing stops. Yes. So if you want, the latest idea is to put a petrol station there. So if you're coming from Ashburton, this petrol station would be just before you hit the houses, if that makes sense. And if you can imagine a 50 hectare, basically a square, coming back from there on that southern approach on the left-hand side, that's where that block is. Yeah. And the donut block, which I think is critical in terms of that will be the first block to roll, that is behind the rugby fields.
Okay. And, I suppose my first question is, when you're talking about bringing it into the map,
yeah,
I think Dunsandel's outside of our Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan area.
And this is what I'm here to chat about.
That's the first point. Okay, so you're not within the Greater Christchurch area.
And I'm kind of here to warmly encourage it.
Okay.
If I could put it as sort of as a bit of a joke, you've torn the corner off the map. If you look at it quite carefully, you can see the lines come down, and they're just tempting you to just close the line at Dunsandel, but someone's cut it off. So, I mean, all the visually challenged people will be very keen for you to close that off, so it just looks a little tidier, and we'll be grateful.
I understand that, we're trying to bring up some images, but look, let's just carry on.
Yeah, and I don't think, look, we can make some great points about rapid transport here today, because Dunsandel's a great help to you because it's split 50-50 either side of both State Highway 1 and the railway line. Yes. So whatever you do in the future, it's going to be a cheap new node. Only 7 k's from Rolleston, so it'll get take up straight away once it gets the go ahead. And you're gonna, how you get all your traffic guys talking about this 800-metre walk and all that sort of distance to your nodes and things like that. Dunsandel's fantastic for that, because it's just gonna quietly creep out evenly on each side of the state highway. So you're gonna get a very dense kind of result for your rapid transit kind of type thing. So you're going to be able to get a commuter node. Now, I don't want to dive down into how, the take up on rapid transit, but once you accept that broad notion that that's a public good, if you like, or a common good, and that's going to be good for the economy, then I'm suggesting that Dunsandel fits into it even better than some of the outer Rolleston blocks. We've got a bit of a challenge with the HPL recent national policy statement, but I think if council was on board, my reading of those documents at the moment is that sort of councils can probably as we go forward, lead those changes a bit easier than private plan changes with the recent highly productive land.
So what class soils do you have there?
Nothing unusual in the district, but certainly highly productive land.
Class 1 to 3, so it's highly productive. Okay.
Yeah, and but in a challenged irrigation zone, so it's overdrawn from a water point of view, and that's generally around the farmers.
So there's no more water to irrigate that.
There's water, but you got to fight for it. Okay. Yeah.
And the land that you've identified doesn't have water consents tied to
well, I was told we could get it, but effectively, as a symbol of the area, it was sort of lost to farmers and trade. We won't be able to make some points about that in the future. But at one point I was told by, I think it was Dairy Holdings, that they'd be happy to trade me some, but I haven't been able to update that. So I think that would be misleading to leave that in front of the panel as a live option, but I don't think water will get in the way, because ultimately urban water supply trumps irrigation. So, and the take is not really that significant. We might want a little bit of water storage, but again, that's nothing the developer couldn't address if we had the general go ahead. We're sort of in this situation because we were just a little bit late to the plan review. So we didn't find out about it until it was really underway. And so the process really struggled to let us on board. And that's not a criticism of it. It's just that this is a 10-year cycle, and we arrived at the 11th hour, and it just didn't work out. So your take home from that is that this report is not informed by developer arguments around Dunsandel. It's had a great report from the officer, but it hasn't had the sort of attention that and the teasing forward, and perhaps the check for the wastewater. Yeah. So
your idea about how people would get in from Dunsandel would be the train there'd be a train on the line and it would stop at a station at Dunsandel. And
I like that idea. Yeah, I think
I'm not putting words in your mouth, but is that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
you say that was sort of.
We could dive into how much rail we should be using into the city if you want. I think of it, but either way, either way, whether it's bus or rail, it's got all the infrastructure there. I've used the trains a lot in London, and it's important to remember that there are millions of commuters around the world that just have a bit of asphalt, maybe a yellow strip, no roof, and really cheap to put in, and off you go. I was looking on the map yesterday, for example, in Papanui, there's already a platform there. We don't necessarily need to take back the building to be able to use the platform, and I've got a little bit of engineering and design knowledge, and it's not hard to whack in a platform, is it? So we could bring back the rail.
Okay.
But I don't want to lose Dunsandel over the wrong side of that argument, however it goes down.
Okay. I'll see if the panel's got any questions, Paul. Bobby.
So that 18 to 20, sorry, not was it we? No. That 18 to 20 million.
Yep.
That would be DCs. No impact on the general Selwyn ratepayer.
That hasn't been discussed. What the two proposals that I've seen, one was led by someone else, and I think that was a 25 or 50% contribution, and I think I suggested that we could stump up with half of it. But if I can make a joke at the same time, I was kind of expecting a little bit of planning support from the council, and they kind of left me out of the process. So I'm a little bit reluctant coming again to offer the cash. And also we've had some recent capital kind of raising restrictions in the nation's law. So it's just a little bit more difficult to raise capital if you can't tell investors you're going to get what suggested that they pay for. So we need a little bit more of agreement, that we're actually going to get the rezoning before we, but what if you look at the numbers, 20 million over say 1,200 or 2,000 lots is a great price. And that doesn't include putting in the laterals in the city and the township now, but but that's just to connect it in. But it is a really good price, and by comparison to say that the 25,000 that they're paying to link in now to just their own little private thing. So I really did my best to try and hustle it through, and I haven't succeeded on that. I'm sorry about that, but yeah, 20 is a good number.
Any other questions from the panel? Okay, Paul, I think you've got a minute or so to go, but I think I've answered it. I've got clear on my head what you're asking for.
Yeah.
You've got your submission on the table, which we've read. I've got my geography right now.
I apologise for that.
No, don't apologise.
They sell a great pie or sausage roll.
Yeah, I think
if you want to pop out for a look, yeah, you will be rewarded.
No, it's a nice stopping place for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess the thing I'd leave with you as a panel is don't underestimate the value of the encouragement that a little bit of an adjustment to your might make. You won't be tying the council's hands. You'll just make it that little bit easier. And one of the things that we have to reflect on is the cost of productivity. And this is not a cheap shot, but I'm just saying from the floor, don't underestimate the value of the encouragement that just making that subtle adjustment in your plan will make it easier for people who are trying to pioneer this in the future. So thanks for your work. Great stuff and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Paul, thank you
Have a
for
great
coming.
day.
Okay, Richmond Residents and Business Association. David, are you here? Come forward. Welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I think if you look at our submission, the general tenure is that we are fully in support of the 30-year plan idea and the need to do this kind of work. In speaking to and supporting our submission, I just want to raise some discussion points relating to the whole business. So we're asking, will the spatial plan consider and act on the mitigating effects the greater plan might bring to the people of the communities who aren't mentioned in the discussions to date? Smaller communities such as ours already have trouble thriving because of the neglect of a well-maintained and appropriate infrastructure, because of a lack of holistic approaches to whole community needs in housing development, and because the consequential social behaviours evident in under-resourced suburbs impact on the whole community. When you talk of, in item 3, protecting, restoring and enhancing the natural environment with particular focus on te ao Māori, or in item 4, when you talk of enabling diverse and affordable housing in locations that support thriving neighbourhoods that provide for people's day-to-day needs, and item 5, providing space for businesses and the economy to prosper in a low-carbon future, and again in item 6, prioritising sustainable transport choices to move people and goods in a way that significantly reduces greenhouse gases emissions and enables access to social, cultural and economic opportunities. What does this actually mean for Richmond? Through our own initiatives, we're addressing land and property development by being involved in discussions about the diversity and density of housing options by collaborating with developers and government and local body representatives. We're also addressing sustainable transport choices by working with the Christchurch City Council about the continuation of the Richmond Roading project, which is a project begun 5 years ago after the earthquakes. And we intend to address the revitalisation of the Stanmore shopping precinct. We're maintaining the natural environment through beneficial restorative environmental work being carried out by Revolution on the Avon River, Otakaro, and the Otakaro project, and in a separate project in Petrie Park. We're providing connectivity and opportunities for social interaction at our community fairs, our men's shed, our repair shop, and our promotion of projects like the restoration of the local school swimming pool, which we're hoping to turn into a community pool, and the establishment of the Laura Ferguson Trust Complex in Richmond. We're recognising the needs for future nature-based solutions and green regenerative businesses through our community garden and recycling projects. And we're promoting activities such as our adventure park, created in conjunction with the local primary school, to establish a complete community. As a metaphor to the plan that we've put forward, or the submission we've put forward, can we consider the river and its tributaries flowing from their sources through Richmond to other areas, bringing sustenance for all forms of life, but also carrying the excesses of man's existence? In the overall plan, where does Richmond fit into that metaphor in terms of what's developed beyond its boundaries? Will the spatial plan consider and act on the mitigating effects the greater plan might bring? Will we still have complete neighbourhoods intersecting with other communities and contributing towards the health of a thriving city, allowing people to enjoy centred mobility, to benefit from responsible land and property development, to benefit from sustainable energy, to practice and benefit from sustainability, to contribute to creating and enjoying nature-based solutions, to avoid the pitfalls of sudden enforced behavioural change, very evident after the earthquakes, to lead the way in developing green and regenerative businesses. We are Richmond, want Richmond to be involved in these discussions and to be heard as the plans for the future unfold. It's a large time frame, 30 years, but we want to be involved in a regular way. We want to continue playing a part in a collaborative atmosphere which maintains continuous consultation and two-way discussions. And that's our submission.
Thank you, David. Look, again, I'm trying to get a home in on Richmond. It's east of Christchurch, and it's in the
Richmond is
Shirley and Linwood. Is that sort of
Richmond is probably the oldest suburbs in Christchurch, just beyond the 4 avenues.
Yes.
BLE Fitzgerald Avenue.
Yes.
Corner in that area.
Okay. That's great.
Goes back to the 1820s.
Yes. Okay. So was that affected by the earthquakes significantly, or that area?
Yes, it was in
Yes.
some degree.
Oh, there we go. That's great.
Very, very random in
Yes.
terms of housing rebuilds and repairs,
Yes.
but infrastructure was severely affected.
Yes.
And we're still waiting for some of the remedial work to be done in that respect.
Okay. So you're just on the edge of the 4 avenues. It's an older suburb,
Yes,
and you've got the Avon flowing along the southern boundary.
yes. It's an interesting suburb in that it sort of cuts itself into 2 halves.
Yes.
We've got South Richmond, which has quite intensive. We think there is enough intensive housing in South Richmond now without lowering the quality of life in that area.
Yes.
And North Richmond is largely, probably mostly your 1/4 acre sections.
Yes.
And has part of that area protected up till now by a heritage plan.
Okay. Very interesting. So I've got a question here from Victoria. Thanks, Victoria.
Thank you. I want to just hone in on your comments in relation to the network of green spaces, enhance and expand the network of green spaces. And you reference the need to be developing food chain links for our native birds and animals through a series of planned planting programs. I'm familiar with the idea of the Tuitaka corridor, which is not in your area, it's in another part of the city. I want to clarify whether, are you asking for the plan to acknowledge and support that concept, or is it just a comment in relation to what the City Council should be doing?
Yes, in many respects, a lot of that work is being done now, and we have been supported. We just want to make sure that that is maintained. we're trying to establish green areas roughly 200 metres apart so that bird life can move from feeding ground to feeding ground. That's what's part of the Petrie Park project. We've also done a lot of planting on the old Shirley Boys High site next to Pariawa Primary School. And then we've got the community garden. So yeah, we just like to see those sort of projects continue to be supported.
Sure, thanks. Look, the other comment I want to make is in relation to the MRT, and you talk about the impacts of the transport movements through the inner city suburbs, talking about narrow streets and congested commercial precincts. Have you got any comments to make on map 7, which shows the mass rapid transit mall urban realm concept, where it shows that there'll be no vehicle transport, vehicle lanes through that part of the corridor, and that it's pedestrian and active transport modes. Anything you wanted to comment in relation to that?
Probably our concern relates to the amount of traffic that is on 2 of the boundary streets, Shirley Road and Hills Road, and the access through Stanmore Road, which is a public transport route. We have some concerns, particularly about Stanmore Road and the safety features. There's a lot of traffic crosses Stanmore Road, a lot of groups of cyclists. And we have further plans to submit an idea with another cycleway, which cycleways are not really the flavour of the month at the moment, but we do have an idea which may alleviate some of those concerns. We have 2 petrol stations which seem to have sales at the same time, and effectively the queues block up Stanmore Road. So they're small issues, but I think they need to be looked at in the overall concept.
Just for context, I'm one of the city councillors here for Christchurch, so I'd encourage you to talk with your local community board about some of those plans and ideas that you've got for your local community.
Yes.
Do we have any other questions? Grant.
Just a comment and a question. You sort of raised a number of issues and thoughts that you were highlighting and querying whether the plan was directed at those sort of things, blue, green, all that kind of stuff. And I think you're right. I think that the things that you were mentioning are precisely the kind of things that the plan is looking to achieve. And I just note on map 15 that the Shirley Road, Stanmore Road are both identified as core transport routes. And one of the ideas of the plan is that there is a little bit more development along those routes so that people can achieve and that they have more modal choice to get to the Shirley Shopping Centre or the Richmond Shopping Centre or whatever. So what you're really asking for is that when the next stage is taking place, that there's more dialogue with the City Council to ensure that your vision is kind of aligned with the other stuff. Yeah, I didn't mention that we have already initiated a cycleway from Shirley Road, Marston's Road corner through the back streets, as it were, of Richmond, coming out at Fitzgerald Ave to take cyclists out of that unsafe, heavy traffic area. And also I comment too that the general tenure of the plan as you've presented it so far, we get the feeling that you will continue to consider these thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a
Victoria?
comment, that's a really successful and innovative laneway, that green cycleway through those back streets. Was really pleased to see that.
That came from local knowledge, so that's sort of strengthens our case to be involved. I think it's a really nice part of the city. I lived there for 3 years in Petrie Street, and I used to cycle into the city and through the greens along the river tributaries and things like that. So it is developing really quite nicely.
I think that's all our questions, David. Thank you so much for coming in and for your presentation. Very much appreciated, and a really good submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, the next submitter is Christchurch Civic Trust. Anne and Chris, are you here? Come forward, please. Make yourself at home there and go ahead, the floor is yours.
Kia ora tātou. Morena, good morning, members of the panel. From the draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, the Trust has identified and highlighted specific matters for the hearing panel's attention, namely in this order: the planning context for the spatial plan, climate change, infrastructure, green spaces, trees, heritage and transport. Dr. Kisling, my fellow Trust Board member, will speak regarding the matters of green spaces, trees, heritage and transport, reserving his personal views on transport for his presentation at 12:15 p.m. today. The Trust endorses statements from the spatial plan relating to the specific matters identified by the Trust. These are included with page references. Key text is highlighted in bold type for the panel's attention. Furthermore, the Trust endorses many of the reporting officer recommendations from Appendix 3. They're compiled in a list at the end of the submission. In some cases, the recommendations enhance statements already endorsed by the Trust. Given the hearing time constraints and allowing the opportunity for questions from the panel, we'll focus now on particular spatial plan statements and accompanying Trust comments. Introduction. The draft Christchurch Spatial Plan is future focused and promotes an aspirational goal for the growth of Greater Christchurch. As such, it is undeniably very ambitious and may well prove to be more than can be achieved in terms of the spatial plan time horizons and resources, including funding. Nevertheless, the plan sets out specific opportunities to deliver economic and environmental benefits for present and future generations. Implementation of the plan will be largely dependent on the capability and capacity of regional and local government to fulfil their respective statutory roles. In respect of the submission of the Christchurch Civic Trust, the Trust endorses the following statements in the spatial plan and, where applicable, the associated recommendations of the reporting officer as identified in the numbered list appended. These are three statements are overarching statements. As key tools to deliver the spatial plan are developed, explicit consideration must be given to how to ensure that the development of high-density housing meets the holistic well-being and lifestyle needs of people. Well-functioning urban environments. The National Policy Statement on Urban Development requires planning decisions to contribute to well-functioning urban environments. The Trust notes the assurance in the spatial plan that the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan the draft Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan is a plan for action. The direction set out in the plan is supported by commitments across central government, local government and mana whenua to ensure the city region remains a great place to live for all. Planning context for the spatial plan. The Trust recognises that there is a legislative framework for the spatial plan. Our comments are directed to consideration of that legislative framework. The Resource Management Act 1991 remains in effect and is relevant for the spatial plan. The spatial plan cites legislation, inter alia, as informing the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, advising also that the spatial plan satisfies the requirements of a future development strategy under the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. In respect of the spatial plan, the Resource Management Act is a relevant matter. The National Policy Statement on Urban Development as relevant national direction is an instrument of that Act, whose purpose, under Section 5, is to promote the sustainable management of natural and physical resources. Under the RMA, sustainable management means managing the use, development, and protection of natural and physical resources in a way or at a rate which enables people and communities to provide for their social, economic, and cultural well-being and for their health and safety, while avoiding, remedying, or mitigating any adverse effects of activities on the environment. The RMA requires both regional councils and territorial authorities to achieve the integrated management of their natural and physical resources as provided through the RMA's hierarchy of national direction, regional policy statements and plans and district plans. Integrated management is an active process of managing the use, development and protection of natural and physical resources as a whole. Page 24 in the spatial plan sets out how the spatial plan will be given effect to by local government. Accordingly, the Trust recommends that integrated management, in terms of the RMA, be added to the key terms listed on pages 10 to 11 and be inserted also as the heading on page 24. Specific matters highlighted by the Civic Trust. Further statements endorsed by the Trust are listed below under the following specific matters identified by the Trust for the hearings panel's consideration. Namely, first of all, climate change. To provide focus, we've highlighted statements in the spatial plan which are critical in respect of climate change. Then we go down to the spatial plan acknowledges that there are some areas of Greater Christchurch that are subject to significant risks from the effects of climate change, and under Opportunity 2 context, climate change is increasing the likelihood of more frequent and severe natural hazards, including storms and flooding. Climate change requires proactive measures to mitigate and adapt to its effects. An integrated spatial planning approach is required, coordinating land use, infrastructure, and environmental protection. Infrastructure. Integrating land development decisions with infrastructure planning and funding is crucial if poor overall outcomes are to be avoided. Strategic land use planning must be integrated with strategic decisions for infrastructure funding and development. Infrastructure is fundamental to the well-being, health and prosperity of communities and the economy. Yet development of the horizontal infrastructure network in respect of housing intensification is not prioritised in the spatial plan. Under Opportunity 5, where strategic infrastructure networks are considered, emphasis is placed on businesses and the economy. This begs the question of balance and the need for integrated thinking, or is the document considering housing as just another business? Already the Council, Christchurch City Council, has acknowledged that the proposed intensification will place strains on the capacity of Christchurch's existing horizontal infrastructure. Our drinking water, quote, our drinking water, stormwater, wastewater, and public transport systems will need to support our increased population and housing based on growth projections for the next 50 years, conceding that in some parts of the city, our major pipes can't accommodate increased growth. If the projected housing growth alone will strain Christchurch of wastewater and stormwater infrastructure, what can then be expected when that infrastructure is further subject to the strains arising from climate change? For many cities, flooding is fast becoming a major issue as historic levels of rain and impervious urban development overwhelm stormwater infrastructure. The draft spatial plan acknowledges that coordinated action with infrastructure providers and the development needed to achieve the desired pattern of growth. Now, just for point of view of time, in relation to development infrastructure in terms of the RMA be added to the key terms. Because Section 30 and 31 of the RMA set out the functions of regional councils and territorial authorities respectively for the purpose of giving effect to the RMA. Both sections include requirements relating to development capacity, which concerns also development infrastructure and the achievement of integrated management. And accordingly, the Trust recommends that the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan adopt a strategic approach to horizontal infrastructure provision, aligning it with the development of proposals for residential and commercial infrastructure intensification to ensure that infrastructure provision and funding is considered from the outset as a key part of developing such proposals, and to avoid time delays and unnecessary costs as a proposal proceeds through the consenting process. And then we've listed some matters to consider in relation to that. Then, just finally, we've given the example of Philadelphia, which is something perhaps which the council is an example of coping with flooding risk, and it's something that would be well worth considering. And now I turn to Chris.
Yes, my contribution here will focus on green spaces, trees, heritage, and as is mentioned, I'll deal with transport later in the day. Under the green spaces, we are very much supportive of the further development of green space, and where it is developed is important in terms of relationship to where people are living and their access to it. So I'm not going to read all this. One point about green spaces and their protection. We have statutory protection of some of our iconic green spaces, such as Hagley Park. We are very much supportive of the idea that there should be a buffer zone around heritage green spaces so that development does not encroach upon them and take away from their values. So Christchurch is Hagley Park and the Latimer Square and Cranmer Square. And you better start thinking also about what you're going to be doing with the corridor down to the sea, which has now come available to us since the housing was removed. Pushing on quickly, trees. Points I want to make about trees is that they are very important in terms not just of visual amenity, but they have a health benefit as well. And how do we protect and preserve our very important treescapes? Because remember, most of the tree canopy of Christchurch has come from since European settlement. It wasn't here before European settlement. We worry about trees being felled to make way for development. And what are the mechanisms that possibly could be used to try and incentivize the retention of listed mature trees in private properties as well as in public space? One way of doing that may be by rates relief. And that rates relief probably should it should be reflected upon the property title. And if you knock down a tree, you pay that past rates back again. That would be an incentive for people to keep those trees. In terms of heritage as well, the same sort of principle might apply, that to incentivize people to retain heritage fabric they own, rates relief for that. But again, it should accumulate in time the value. And if you decide down the track that you're going to bowl that to build something new, you've lost your heritage status and you give the money back. That way is an increasing incentive over time for retention of heritage, retention of trees. They have more and more value over time. Trees are heritage items too. They live for hundreds of years. I'm mindful of the time, that we've only given you about 1 minute.
Ian and Chris.
So I'm going to pause there, leave my transport for later.
Yes, that's great.
And I'm very interested in what sort of response or questions you might have to our presentation.
Yes. Look, you've written some notes up you've been reading from. Are those able to be sent to the Secretariat? Because we will take in the submissions you've made to us orally. So have you got your notes written up and that you could email through to us?
I didn't hear that, sorry.
Well, we've already sent through,
Yes, we've got your submission.
yes, the original written submission.
Yes.
And then you should also have,
A supplementary.
Oh, so you've already got,
Yeah.
they're in the bundle. Okay, thank you very much. So we've got those. So look, I'll go to questions. Victoria.
Good morning, thank you. Yeah, my question is around the references you've made in your submission where you're troubled about the limited references to European cultural and historical heritage. And the officers have addressed that in their report with one of them is inserting a new direction to protect, recognise and restore the historic heritage of Greater Christchurch. Are you satisfied with the tweaks and the responses that the officers have given to acknowledge that point?
yes. That's an example of where they've actually enhanced it because it was sort of a bit vague in the original plan. And when we prepared, you know, this, and then subsequently we looked at the officers' recommendations, we realised, yes, they had taken it further. So,
Lovely.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
it's addressed it well.
Great.
Yes, Nicole.
Thanks for coming to talk to us. Just more on the rates relief that you were talking about. Is there somewhere else that you know as an example of that have used that idea for heritage and trees?
I'm sorry, my hearing is not good at the moment. Even though I got my hearing aid and turned up, I didn't hear your question.
When you were talking about protecting the trees and heritage by having something like rates relief or something like that,
Yes.
do you have examples of where that's been done elsewhere?
Not off the top of my head, I can't say I can quote any particular examples, and that it doesn't, to my mind, doesn't stop us being thinking in that square, because even if we're new doing it, why not? We do give rates relief for heritage items like McLean's Mansion at the moment here in Christchurch, while it is being restored. And if it stays publicly accessible under the Act, that allows that to happen in terms of rates relief and things that will go on. If it started being used for commercial purposes, then rates would be applicable. My point is that I would like to see people wanting to get onto the heritage list to get the rates relief, and it means value over time. But they wouldn't get that rates relief if they did not maintain that property. So they might be able to offset the rates relief against their maintenance bills and things like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Grant?
Yeah, thanks for your submission. Just thinking about the blue-green infrastructure and your comments about concerns for loss of trees in the city. Do you think that going forward, as perhaps along those core transport routes, that intensification, when it takes place, you're suggesting that we need to make sure that any significant vegetation within there is kind of looked at as part of it.
I have some quite specific comments about that coming up in my
right. Okay, because I was going. I suppose I'm going to say, do you
I go back to the retention of trees in relationship to development? From a cadastral perspective, from ownership of properties in Christchurch, in the central city area post-earthquake, we had quite a lot of title amalgamations take place to get allotments of sufficient size to do some of the major projects. None of that happened in the suburbs. We do have a situation where you have some quite narrow, small slivers of sites under the proposals of the previous government, and still live at the moment, but you could build whatever you liked on that sliver of land, 3 stories high, whatever, leaving no space for communal garden space or trees and canopy and so forth. If you required developers to actually amalgamate a certain size of land before you went into some of these sorts of higher rise developments, then you would be able to take examples, say, from some of the European and places like that, where they have courtyard spaces and the living spaces around a courtyard, and the courtyard is green.
It also links in with the Philadelphia example where private owners were required to participate in their scheme.
So what you're suggesting is that in the next phase, I suppose, that there's some working through to ensure that happens. Do you see in those situations that the amenity and tree planting within the public realm will become streetscapes, parks, those sort of things will become more important? Is that what you're thinking may happen?
You want to answer that?
Very much so. I mean, if you're building these high-rise structures and increasing the population in them, we're not seeing where is the increase in creation of new pocket parks, or even the protection of existing parks. I mean, we've seen in Auckland what's happened to some of their public parks. They've been taken over for housing.
Thank you very much for your attendance and your submissions. I must say I do love your mission statement that you started with when your written submission as a civic trust. So good luck with your good work, and thank you for attending.
We have Plan Change 14 coming up.
Good luck with that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Felicity, are you here for the airport? Welcome.
Do you want to stay for a few minutes here or go out?
What?
Do you want to stay for the here or go out?
Hard copies of my speaking points in our
Great. Yeah, bring them forward. Let's give them to Jenny, Felicity, and we'll. Thanks, Jenny.
Kia ora, Morena. Felicity Hayman here. I'm the Environment and Planning Manager for Christchurch International Airport, and I'm putting my apologies in for Nick Flack, who's the General Manager of Future Planning and Sustainability. He's actually currently in Europe at the moment talking to the next generation of aircraft manufacturers. Wow. And working on our hydrogen consortium, so he couldn't be here today.
Thank you.
So I've got some brief speaking notes, and then I've left a bit of time for questions. Cool, okay. So as a starting point, background, Christchurch International Airport is a multi-generational strategic asset with national, regional and district social and economic significance. This is highlighted in the package of expert summaries that has been provided to the hearings panel in advance and in this package. Aligned with the GCP's vision for the spatial plan, CIL is focused on servicing the projected growth of aviation activity and supporting maintenance, freight, logistics, as well as the business activity necessary to service the Greater Christchurch population of approximately 1 million people. While CIL's core business is to facilitate the safe and efficient airport operation of the aviation activity at Christchurch Airport, the broader airport campus also hosts a range of other businesses and activities, and it is a key contributor to the social and economic prosperity of Greater Christchurch. This role is only going to grow into the future. CIL is heavily invested in planning for the future in order to best service the long-term infrastructure needs of Greater Christchurch. Integral to this is CIL's climate policy and drive to accelerate the decarbonisation of the wider aviation sector. One key aspect of this is CIL's development of an on-site renewable energy precinct, Kōwhai Park, whereby the energy produced will power Christchurch Airport campus and future aviation activities. CIL's general position on the spatial plan. We've recognised the spatial plan as a key planning document for Christchurch International Airport. At a high level, CIL supports the spatial plan and agrees with taking a strategic approach to long-term infrastructure and urban growth planning in particular. CIL's position on the spatial plan can be divided into two core elements: identification and recognition of Christchurch International Airport as a key transport, energy and employment node, or an acronym, the K10. That is, the spatial plan should recognise the role and importance of a modern airport is and will be, and which is currently broader than it's in the plan. adequate protection and future-proofing of aviation and campus activities to ensure Christchurch Airport can continue to operate safely and efficiently now and into the future. This is essential for Christchurch Airport to continue to provide social, environmental and economic benefits. A bit more detail on Christchurch Airport as a key transport, energy and employment node. Classification of Christchurch as this would provide the appropriate recognition of the full range of core aviation and other services provided at the airport campus and its contribution to the social, environment and economic prosperity of Greater Christchurch. The office's report does not agree with CIL's suggestion, noting that there may be other centres that qualify as a K10. CIL's view that airports provide a unique combination of activities and it is distinct from other key business areas. As demonstrated by the Market Economics Overview Report, the activities at Christchurch Airport campus make a significant contribution to the social, economic well-being of the communities and economies of Greater Christchurch, the South Island and New Zealand. The elements as outlined in CIL's submission can be summarised as energy. Sustainability is already at the heart of CIL's business and a key future investment focus for CIL is to assist with the decarbonisation of the aviation sector. Christchurch Airport should be identified as an energy hub because it needs to grow energy now. It will need significantly more energy in the future as the transport network decarbonises, and it is well placed to lead the way in green infrastructure. Transport. Christchurch Airport is a major gateway connecting Christchurch and the South Island to other parts of New Zealand and overseas. An effective and resilient transport network for the movement of goods and people is critical. This has been particularly demonstrated during severe weather events we've had recently and seem to be increasing, and also natural disasters. Employment. Christchurch Airport campus provides a broad range of employment opportunities. In total, aviation and other businesses at the campus sustain around 9,000 full-time, part-time or casual roles. CIL expects this number will only increase as there will be future opportunities for additional and other types of businesses to locate at the airport campus. Lastly, protection. For Christchurch Airport to continue to serve the local, regional and national communities and economies, the planning framework must adequately protect and future-proof its safe and efficient operation. Noise contours are a key planning tool that ensure regions grow appropriately to the needs of the communities they serve. CIL supports the inclusion of the 50 dBA LDN noise contour as a constraint, but considers the spatial planning maps should be amended to reflect the most up-to-date information, which is the 2023 50 dBA LDN outer envelope contour, as shown in its submission. I just pause on this point and note that the contour that is in the currently in the spatial plan is outdated. The 2023 remodeled contour, you'll note, is a different shape. And the reason it's a different shape is it reflects changes to airspace navigation and aircraft flight paths. So that the contour that's currently in the spatial plan just actually does not reflect where areas are going to be exposed to aircraft noise. So to appropriately and adequately future plan and do the purpose of a spatial plan, it's really critical that the most up-to-date information is used and areas that are going to be exposed to aircraft noise are properly identified. CIL acknowledges the office's recommendation to include text explaining where the remodelling process is relative to the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement review. However, CIL's position is that the 2023 50 dB LDN outer envelope contour represents the most up-to-date technical information of the geographical extent of projected aircraft noise exposure within Greater Christchurch. A forward-looking strategic planning document for the Greater Christchurch area should include the remodelled contours. The risk of leaving them out in the interim period before the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement review is completed is far greater for Christchurch Airport and the Canterbury community than the opportunity cost for alternative land development in the interim period. CIL was also concerned with the office's recommendations, which result in a general weakening of the wording in relation to protection of strategic infrastructure. In all cases, new noise-sensitive urban development should be avoided within the 50 dBA LDN noise contour. There is no circumstance where it can be carefully managed, which is wording that the officer has recommended as an alternative. The title of Map 5 is also recommending to be changed from areas to protect and avoid to key constraint areas. When combined with the wording change above, CR was concerned the spatial plan's protective provisions are not strong enough for the significant infrastructure assets such as Christchurch Airport. And I probably add to that, I've just returned from International Airport Noise Conference, which was really interesting. And I presented and spoke on a panel about Christchurch Airport and the Christchurch community's intergenerational approach to airport safeguarding. And within that room, the intergenerational approach was envied and highly respected. At the moment in North America, airports model their noise controls out to a 10-year forecast and are under a significant amount of pressure to make their noise controls smaller as a result of the number of people who have been able to build homes and the communities that have been able to establish within areas exposed to aircraft noise and the effects that it's having on those people. So our approach of intergenerational ultimate capacity noise forecasting was very much envied and respected. And I think it really highlighted to me just how important it was to maintain that approach for as long as possible. That's
Thank you, Felicity, and really appreciate the summary document you provided us, really picking out the highlights. So that's super helpful. We'll see if there's some questions from the panel. Victoria?
I'm always cautious when I'm asking questions on things that I don't know a great deal of information about. I just wanted to pick up on bird strike.
Yes,
You haven't really touched on that today, and I see you're wanting recognition of the issue in the spatial plan to ensure the management of activities to constitute bird strike is highlighted and applied consistently across Greater Christchurch. I just don't understand how that could be done. I wonder whether you could talk to us a little bit about that. Is that appropriate?
Yes. Yeah, certainly can. Bird strike risk is identification of areas of the airspace where our high risk bird species, which are birds that either are massive or flock, so if have a higher risk of hitting an aircraft, and if they did hit an aircraft, they would cause some damage. The Christchurch Airport is taking an intergenerational position on bird strike risk management around accepting that there are some activities that need to happen within the area impacted by bird strike risk, and we want to ensure that these areas are identified and known, and we want to work with our community, our stakeholders, the regulator, to ensure that activities can and land use decisions can be made balancing the risk of bird strike risk management. And I guess for a tangible example of this, it's the bird strike risk management area is quite large. The biggest zone is 13 kilometres from a circle around the airfield, and that's identifying the areas of the airspace that birds and aircraft share. So once the aircraft gets high enough, then they don't share the airspace anymore. And aircraft that are taking off and landing are at their most vulnerable for an incident. So that's kind of why you want to protect and understand, is there a risk for bird strike, and is there a habitat that will attract our high risk species? So it's trying to manage that habitat and work with landowners to, if there is habitat that exists, to understand and manage those high risk bird species. So we have a wildlife team that works with neighbours around us to help them manage, and we also have quite a significant program of wildlife monitoring, whereby we understand bird populations within that 13-kilometre radius, so we can make informed decisions around how to best manage land use surrounding the airport.
So is it your contention that the spatial plan doesn't go far enough to help protect and recognise the work that needs to be continually going on in that space?
No, I think we are just concerned and wanting to ensure that bird strike risk is identified as something that as an aspect that needs to be included in planning documents going forward. And if possible, we would like to have the 13-kilometre radius included in the spatial plan, but we acknowledge that it covers quite a significant area, and at that level of detail may be more appropriate in planning documents that will follow on from this.
I think there'll be a question for the officers later today in that particular area, because I can't recall reading in the officers' report on this particular issue. It might be there, but I just can't recall it at this moment. So I'd be wanting to look into that.
And just quickly, have you dealt with that specific issue about the 13K area in the report?
That's not directly mentioned in the office report.
Okay. I think we should note a question to fill out for the officers regarding that point in our running list of questions we've got.
Yeah.
We'll come back to the details of that. Okay, Victoria? Yes. Felicity, I have two questions. The first one relates to map 5, and this is where you've talked about changing areas to protect and avoid key constraints areas. So this shows the current air noise boundaries as in the current regional plan, 2013.
So those noise contours were more modelled in 2008.
Okay.
They're very outdated.
Yes. So you've got an updated set which is in the public domain.
Yes.
And that looks ahead to like a 700,000 Christchurch or 1 million Christchurch, or what's the time horizon?
The noise contours, both the operative ones and the ones in the regional policy statement and the remodelled ones, model out to ultimate capacity, and that is a really future-looking view of the airport and the future noise environment, and is forecasted the busiest the airport could ever be based on airspace constraints.
But not population based or growth. What are the growth scenarios and the inputs to the modelling?
I can't recite them off the top of my head. Sorry. But it's based on taking aviation forecasts and then further kind of using that to calculate what the ultimate capacity is. So it is we haven't done the direct comparison, but it is to factors in significant population growth and would be more than 1 million people.
Okay. And this is a work that Airbiz does, or is it?
A raft of experts. So Airbiz managed it for us. Marshall Day Acoustics do the modelling. Airways provide the airspace navigation input.
So I want to ask you a particular question. You say that the officers are recommending to us that, look, it's not appropriate for us to put that new noise modelling information into the spatial plan, and they're suggesting that that really should sit with the new RPS review that's coming up. I think it's proposed to be notified next year, team. You make the comment that you're concerned about the opportunity cost that in that interim period between now and then, there may be some land uses that come in that affect you. So how real is that cost? And we're talking about a year, aren't we? So
I think that the cost is quite real. The purpose of the spatial, my understanding of the purpose of the spatial planning is to highlight and put forward a direction for the rest of the planning framework that will filter underneath it and identify long-term future land use decisions. So and I guess it goes back to the 2023 remodeled noise contours are a different shape to the current contours, and they're quite different.
Yes.
So including the old contours and using that as a constraint on where development shouldn't, certain types of development shouldn't go, or where development should go, is using outdated information, and there might be a proposal or a development for a future greenfield development in the area that is under the new noise contours, but not the old noise contours.
Yes.
So we are. I know. I think that the year is a really good kind of point on the flip side as well, in that if through the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement something changes in what noise contour is, ends up being included in the final version of the plan, it's a small time frame whereby you're creating the biggest protection as possible for the airport, and you can undo that decision really easily and really quickly by just updating the line in the map. Whereas if development occurs in that year period, or by the time the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement review process is actually concluded, it's going to be a lot more than a year, from which you can't undo it. So it's a cost. The cost of, I guess, pushing pause and identifying that area as an unknown for a 2-year period or a year period is a much less cost than accidentally enabling development to occur in those areas.
Understand that you call them opportunity costs, so that's context. But my second question relates to map 15, which is a transport network map. And we have heard some submitters say, in terms of MRT, we should be having MRT heading out to the airport, and we should be planning for that in the spatial plan. And some are saying it should go further east. What's the airport's view about the fact that the airport is shown on map 15 as a core public transport route, but there's no future MRT identified? What's the airport's?
We were kind of surprised at that. The airport is a huge transport node for Christchurch, Canterbury, and the South Island, and providing access for our passengers and for the 9,000 people or plus that work on the airport. Public transport options was really, really important, and we would very much support and encourage mass rapid transport out to the airport.
Does your submission actually specifically ask for that? Felicity, I can't.
I think so.
Okay, we'll go. We've asked the officers for some further information about what the current PT MRT position is. So the GHD summary does touch on that, and I think my understanding is there's a reluctance to put mass rapid transport out to the airport because of the lack of residential population that directly is located close to the airport, because obviously there's a conflict there with avoiding noise sensitive activities. Yes.
But Christchurch Airport's position is to recognise that we're not a standard node, I guess, and it's your movement of people is not people getting up in the morning and going to work and then coming home. There is an element of that because there is a lot of people that work at the airport, but you've also got the passenger base that it services, which is a flow of people all throughout the day with some peaks. We do have some really early morning peaks with the Trans-Tasman flights, and then we do have some late night peaks as well. So I think it's probably doing a bit of work to understand how to best service the airport and recognising that it's a slightly different, has slightly different demands than anywhere else in the city.
Yeah. Is there an airport flyer or airport bus that comes into the city? Is there currently or not?
Yeah, there is. I can't remember the
And roughly what's the time frame? It will vary between the different times of day, but is it a 20-minute trip in or a half hour, or what's the general?
From the city centre, I think it's about a 30-minute trip in.
30-minute trip. Okay.
There's been a recently updated route 8 to 8 port to port, and the buses are running about every 15 minutes along that route, which goes up Waimakariri Road.
Okay.
I think probably to add to that, the other aspect about mass rapid transport is that route currently services passengers only, and there is a lot of people that work at the airport every day, and at the moment everyone drives. There's a few of us like myself who bike, but it would be really a really positive step in the right direction around alternative transport options and carbon emissions if there was a more viable public transport option to service the campus and not just the passengers.
Yes, I've certainly taken on board the use of the word campus. It's a thing, isn't it? It's a hub. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And that's our lingo. We call it our campus because it is quite big.
It's good, Grant. Look, we're running out of time a little bit, but I'll take a couple of questions, Grant, and then Victoria and Gail as well. So just keep them short, team, and we'll
just quickly more focusing on the campus and the internal infrastructure to get those 9,000 people from one end to the other and across the site. Does the airport have a plan to improve sustainability issues and accessibility issues for its employees?
I guess for the businesses that are located on the campus, we don't directly offer anything, but we're currently reviewing our airport master plan, which includes looking at surface access and what the transport nodes are. We're also working on using or developing what we call the Russley Road setback and creating cycling and walking networks throughout the airport campus, so staff can go for a walk at lunchtime, or they have a safe and a pleasant outdoor area that they can use to cross the campus, and then also go and get lunch from some of the restaurants and cafes across the campus.
Victoria, quickly.
Just jumping back onto the MRT and the route to the airport. Do you have any tourist data numbers that underpin that could underpin this in terms of tourists that are coming through the airport and in and out of the city to stay in Christchurch as a destination as opposed to just passing through?
Yes, we will be able to get some of those numbers. It would possibly be relying on Stats NZ data, but that's definitely something we can look at.
Felicity, could you just pop an email through to the Secretariat?
Yep.
Email with that information?
Yep.
Thank you. And Gail.
Kia ora, Felicity. Just a quick question around, I know that you're talking about you're doing future, looking into the future and how things are going. So I know, yeah, that you've got the looking at powering of aviation and stuff like that. I was just wondering, is there a time frame around that? And is that aviation of the future looking into noise as well as decarbonising for those?
That's a great question. So the transition of aviation, the timeframes are sort of unknown, but Air New Zealand has committed to transitioning by 2030. We are actively working with Airbus and a hydrogen consortium in the sector to understand and enable that transition. It is a massive amount of work. It's really exciting, but one of the big enablers for that is Corfu Park and the energy precinct. So we will have enough energy so that when the airlines turn up and they want to plug their plane in to charge it, it will happen. In regard to the noise question, noise contours are remodeled every 10 years, and one of the key inputs to that is looking at the current and the future fleet. At the moment, the future generation aircraft, we don't have any data on what the noise profiles of those aircraft are going to be. But there's also been quite a shift in the aviation sector in that it used to be reducing the sound of aircraft was the most important thing. That's now has a bit of balance around carbon emissions, and if you can get a more efficient plane that is slightly louder, that would be a bit more accepted by the aviation community. Or by the aviation sector. So we also try and ensure that the remodeled contours are modelled on known information. So in the next version of the contours, that will include noise information on next generation aircraft. And then, sorry, lastly, quickly, the other aspect is that at the moment, the generation aircraft that service New Zealand and come into Christchurch International Airport, a lot of the noise is actually from the air as it moves through and past the aircraft. It's not necessarily from the engines itself, and regardless of the propulsion method, that noise will still exist. So we don't actually anticipate that the noise levels are going to change that much. Yeah. Again, I sense checking in like 10 years time, maybe we'll have more information.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Felicity, for coming in. That was really interesting and very well presented. Thank you. We'll take that. And if you can get that question to Victoria's answer to Victoria's questions about the numbers coming and going directly airport to stay in the CBD as a destination, that'd be great.
Yep, no, I can easily do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we now moving to Holly, Cashmere Park, Heartwood Investment Trust, and Robert Brown. Come forward, Holly. Thank you.
Won't take up much of your time, so I'll be pretty quick. So just to introduce myself again, my name is Holly Lozak. I work for Elliott Sinclair as a resource management planner. You probably already heard that last Friday. Yes. But today I'm representing Cashmere Park Limited, Heartwood Investment Trust, and Robert Brown for their submission on the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. Just a couple of points to summarise our client submission. The creation of a significance criteria is needed that recognises that not all land that is rezoned will be developed within a timely manner. There needs to be scope for active development of land, as well as being able to provide greater flexibility and accuracy around development capability. Our client submission is generally in support of high density living, but acknowledge that there are difficulties that have been identified by Fire Emergency New Zealand in building closer and more densely. So these limitations can include difficulty escaping flames between buildings that are more densely populated and located, multiple buildings becoming ablaze, and the difficulty running hoses to buildings, as well as the risk to firefighters themselves. A couple of key points within the officer's section 42A report. Most submission points do not support the greenfield approach in the draft spatial plan, noting that the draft spatial plan does not spatially identify greenfield areas on maps 2 and 14. A number of submitters called for a significance criteria to be developed as per clause 3.8 of the NPS for urban development. Submitters considered that without spatially identifying preferred locations for greenfield growth in the medium and longer term, or providing a significance criteria, there is substantially less assurance for the development sector that proposals support the desired pattern and growth within the draft spatial plan. The officer's section 42A report does not recommend any changes to the draft spatial plan based on specific submissions for greenfield opportunity sites. In terms of our client's submission on PC14, which is currently at its hearing stage, they do not support this statement as a high level of assessment in terms of the feasibility for residential development has been carried out. It is acknowledged, whilst no changes to the draft spatial plan are recommended based on specific submission points, it has been considered that the draft spatial plan needs to ensure requirements of the future development strategy under the NPS for urban development delivers on national direction. Just a couple of points to conclude on. It is important to acknowledge that while there are negatives involved with greenfield developments and more urban intensification, as highlighted by Fire Emergency New Zealand, these concerns can be addressed as part of the outline development plan implementation process as part of future residential developments. These ODPs can then form part of the relevant district plan that need to be complied with. There are also positives in terms of greenfield developments and further urban intensification. This can include contributing towards the housing supply shortage, promoting expansion of cities, allowing for population growth, as well as the construction times are generally a lot quicker with greenfield developments. The draft spatial plan states that the Canterbury Regional Council is reviewing the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement, which does include developing a significance criteria for new greenfield areas. The inclusion of a criteria on significant development capacity is essential for ensuring transparency about how an assessment will be undertaken to determine significance under Policy 8 of the NPS for urban development. It is also key to consider that by identifying areas for residential development over the longer time frame, that we can then prevent or mitigate any reverse sensitivity matters even before the development takes place. Examples of this have actually been carried out in Australia, where industrial areas have been identified over the next 100 years. Just as a last point, as the draft spatial plan is not Canterbury Regional Policy Statement, it does not at this time include a significance criteria. Therefore, the draft spatial plan will provide a foundation in terms of the review of the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement. I am happy to answer any questions from the panel.
Holly, before we do that, can we put up Kashmir Road, the area that Holly's representing, just on the map so we can have a look at that? That just like you did with the Richmond, that was great. In the meantime, Robbie, you go ahead with the question.
Just, yeah, 145. Are you sure?
Sorry, can you please repeat that?
Paragraph 1.4.5.
I don't have that paragraph. Are you just able to highlight
it? In your submission.
The city's had its boom of multi, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
How confident are you that we've had our boom? I know my parents, when they died, we're going to split it up into multi-units. So I'm just...
I'm probably not as confident on that now. I can probably review that statement that was made in the submission and then provide further comment on that.
I think your statement's pretty good. I think, Ollie, that you're not standing by that. So I think the key thing that Robbie's asking you about is the city has had its boom of multi-unit flats and exhausted the demand. That's the statement. You're not standing by that on reconsideration?
Correct.
Okay, so we can just cross that out in terms of just your view. So look, we are now in, can you home us in on where?
Yes, so the submission site, it actually covers quite a number of allotments. So it is, so to the north of the site is Sparks Road, and to the south is Cashmere. It borders 200 Cashmere Road, so that could be a property to search to kind of hone in on the area. Yep, so it's the portion of land that extends from Sparks Road right down to Cashmere Road, and it also borders Lestrella.
Can we see Sparks Road on this?
Sparks Road's just over further. If you drag it over towards your left,
okay,
you'll see Sparks Road.
It's to the north.
It's up the top, is it?
Yes, to the north.
Runs onto.
I can see it at the top.
Yeah.
So this is quite a big chunk of land.
Yeah, there's
the size roughly do we?
I think it's about 14 hectares.
14 hectares.
Something like that, I think it's between 10 and 14, but I'm not sure on the actual specific size. Yeah, that's
okay. It's not that whole block, is it, or is it?
No, so it's there's some established residential land already there, but it does include the large portion that's just up by Sparks Road and extends right down to Cashmere.
Cashmere Road.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's not that whole vacant land. It's just it's kind of hard to see from here, but yeah, it's just a straight. So if you move the cursor to the right, what's to my right, the other way around. Yeah, so if you go up, yeah, it's pretty much covering that portion of land and then the land underneath it as well.
Okay, so it comes through there. So
correct.
On that green area that we're just circling around now, the engineers, that's roughly the location.
Yeah.
Correct. Has that been subject to a plan change request or submission?
It's a submission against PC14 for a rezoning change.
Against, so it's not shown in PC14.
No, it's no. So currently it's there's a portion of land that under PC14 it is proposed to be residential, but the last large portion of the land is currently zoned to be rural, which we're submitting.
And the reason why it's not being supported for residential?
The majority of the land, apart from a small sliver that just extends right through the property, it's just all rural, which of course our submitters don't agree is the best option for the land itself, because it isn't actually being used for any high productive activities. It is more suited for residential. So yeah, so we will be presenting against that.
And is it covered by one of our infrastructure for flood or liquefaction or
flooding? Yes. So it is, there is parts of the site that is within the flood management area, high flood hazard,
okay,
that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Panel, Grant.
Yeah, the context is difficult to understand, and I'm wondering if you could supply us with a plan that identifies the submitter sites that you've identified in 1.2.
Yep.
In the context, I'm particularly interested in the Southwest Christchurch area plan and how that fits into all of that, because otherwise I really don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, no problem. Yep, no, we can easily supply that.
Gail.
Kia ora. Yeah, I would, because I noticed in 1.2, you've got that you have actually already done. Was it yourself and your clients that had done the flooding risk assessment?
Yeah, so that's been done within Elliott Sinclair. So we've had relative people more.
Well, we don't have that, do we, in our?
No, no, that hasn't been supplied as part of this, but it has been as part of the submission against PC14.
Okay. So this is this overlap of the detail around PC14 and the spatial, big picture spatial planning that we've got in front of us, Holly. That's fair. Yes. So certainly, if you could get a plan showing the area your clients land.
Yes, no, I can definitely send that through today.
Get it through to the Secretariat. Any other questions from the panel? No, thank you for seeing us again, Holly. Is this your last time, or are you?
Yes.
Okay, well, lovely to see you again. Thank you for your submission. We will take a break through to starting again at 10:45. So we'll just go for a coffee. Thank you. Welcome, Bridget. We did have Grant here briefly, but he's headed off, so we'll just wait for him to come back. Yeah, he'll be here. Yes. We'll start your time when he gets back. And Kate, good to see you. Finally arrived from sunny Wellington. Yeah. Good. Okay. Right. Look, I think we might get underway. Grant can catch up with us. We've got on a pretty tight time frame as we go through. So, Bridget, welcome. And the time is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bridget and sitting beside me is my father, We are presenting today on behalf of a group of landowners who live and operate under Christchurch International Airport Units project. The colour band shown on this image, showing various levels of noise around the airport's operations. The green band is set at 50 decibels, and that is currently what is the out of control boundary of the airport. The relationship with the CIAL has adversely affected many members within our group for 30 years past, fraught with litigation. These allow for a bit of scope collaboration. It is important that this is explained clearly for both experts and witnesses on the matter, as the issues we are raising affect far more people than just our group. It includes the people from the 3 district councils in the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan. I will be covering the current housing crisis and future needs within the Greater Christchurch Plan's timeline of 30 years. The consideration that needs to be given here to the clear and directive housing policy of our incoming government, and how the airport's over-regulated air noise contours contours unjustly and adversely affect our city.
Brooke will cover the process moving forward regarding the treatment of the air noise contours currently considered in PC 14 and its consequences, ECAN, the process owner, and the process timelines and outcomes. The need for housing. This here is actually a map from the Greater Christchurch plan, and what it's actually focused on are protected areas. And you'll see in the middle there a funny looking cross, which is actually the airport and its operations. We are all aware that the housing crisis in Christchurch alone has indicated we are in desperate need for 50,000 new residential dwellings. This map shows the projections within the next 30 years for flood levels along our shared coastline. This map is a close-up of Waimakariri district. Land projected to be below annual flood level in 2050. This has been sourced from coastal.climatecentral.org, and we suggest you all take a look. This map, the third, being a close-up of the eastern coast of Christchurch. This week, an article in the, by Oliver Wells, Business Desk, states that CCC has estimated 20,000 homes will be swamped with rising sea levels at a cost of $14 billion. 70,000 new residential dwellings are needed. Back to your protected areas. The new national-led government will be announced tomorrow. Regardless of the mix, all parties campaigned on the housing crisis and what they would do to fix it. In challenging times, we have repeatedly focused on water, food, and housing. Earthquakes, COVID, floods, fires, and other extreme weather events. The Greater Christchurch plan should have these basic human requirements at the forefront of your planning, prioritising people's basic needs. National housing policy has been mindful of our council's needs. It directs councils to open up land for rezoning, fit for purpose, and it's even incentivising it. It specifically mentions the intended development for city fringes as it addresses the need for a varied mix of housing options for people to live. We do not all want to live in apartments in the CBD. CIAL's air noise contours cover from Kaiapoi to Rolleston, the Waimak River to Hagley Park, 200 square kilometres, or in relative terms, 10,000 hectares of land. You can see by this image that there is a large distance between the 50 and 55 contour lines. You must understand this. We are in a unique position. CIAL is the only, and I repeat, only airport in New Zealand with an outer control boundary of 50 decibels. The earthquake minister at the time, who under the land usage recovery plan in 2013, embedded the outer control boundary in the LERP. While in opposition for the last 6 years, we have spent a great deal of time providing evidence to Mr. Brownlee, and we have become aware that he did not, in fact, have the full picture. He was lobbied at the time by the CEO of Christchurch International Airport, Mr. Jim Bolt. Mr. Jerry Brownlee will be returning to Parliament in some capacity yet to be determined. But what we do know is that if asked, he will be prepared to comment. We ask that the commissioners speak to Mr. Brownlee regarding the contours, specifically the outer control boundary, before they make any recommendations on the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan?
Well, are there any questions?
Well, are you going to?
Yeah, perhaps, Brooke, if you go through your.
You want me? Okay.
And then we'll.
I have written an open letter which has been circulated to the councillors and various entities in ECAN and CCC, Waimakariri and Selwyn. My main concern is that there has been a review done by an expert panel on the contours commissioned by ECAN and has been made public by, it went into the public domain, but the airport are using it now for the district plans. I strongly believe that the determination of the airport noise contours should be removed from PC 14 for the following reasons. The new government policy, the government has a policy to instruct councils to determine 30 years of developable land and will, if not followed, determine for them. I've been given an email confirming that this policy stands. Their intent is greenfield development, not intensification in the cities. Secondly, ECAN is the sole decision maker when it comes to the decibel level of the new contours, which will be determined in their RPS late 2024. The new contour at 50 decibel, by being included in PC 14, will go into district plans of Selwyn, Waimakariri and CCC. This is not only irresponsible but nonsensical when ECAN is in the process of new contour determination, with contours likely to come in line with NZ 6805, which is the standard in New Zealand outer control boundary of 55. This is premature as ECAN has not determined the new contour, which may well be 55 to 57. CIAL are pushing for this hearing to reconfirm the 50 decibel contour on the revised 2023 contour and increase their level of control over landowners by adoption of the outer envelope contour and not the AANC, which is the annual average noise contour preferred and advised by the review panel to ECAN. This expert review is owned by ECAN and is in their domain to make determination for their RPS, not this PC 14 hearing. In my opinion, CIAL should not be pushing this line, as in effect, ECAN have ownership of the review for their determination of contours for the RPS in 2024. CCC, Selwyn, Waimakariri and ECAN should be sitting down together and working contours for the RPS and removed totally from PC 14 scope. And this is just plain common sense.
Thank you, Brock. Thank you, Felicity. So panel questions? Sorry, Bridget.
Thank you.
Sorry. Felicity was
Airport.
Airport, yeah. With a brain fade there, sorry.
You're forgiven.
Yeah, Bridget and Brock, thank you. Any questions? Robbie.
So we heard from the airport this morning.
Yes.
Have you seen what they've sent us?
No, we don't need to. Look, this has been going on for 30 years, if the truth be known. Individually, landowners living under the airport have tried to address this individually and got nowhere. We formed a group 2.5 years ago, and we've been stuck in the process, waiting for reviews. So I'm sure it's the same that they've said in other submissions that we've seen.
Thank you. Grant.
I'm just curious about your comment about the review being incorporated in the Waimakariri and the City Council district plans before a decision has been made by the regional council. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. I understand the new contours as published by CIAL and ECAN have been put into the new proposal for the different councils, showing the outer envelope and the existing and the annual average noise contour. And CIAL are wanting to suck everyone into getting this new envelope in, and they then actually control more land than they currently do. Look,
the timings are out. When we started this and first went to ECAN, we've submitted on multiple plans, policies, etc. With delays, etc. It doesn't flow into things nicely. We're mindful that this process, if you do embed the 50 out of control boundary, it's then going to be put into different plans, and it's so much harder to take it out. So we're just asking you to be mindful. Please talk to Jerry Brownlee. The government are well aware. He is well aware of the situation. He is the person to talk to, and he is ready to talk, but he just hasn't been asked. So please ask.
Bridget, I just Grant.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we take a question to staff to just give us a bit of a briefing on that.
I think my understanding, and the staff will correct me if I'm wrong. So what's shown in the spatial plan are the old contours that were in the 2013 RPS version, correct? And yes, the staff are recommending that for the spatial plan, they stay in there because any future noise boundaries will have to go through a RPS and district council plan reviews to get embedded in those planning documents. So I think my understanding and staff, if the RPS includes new extended noise boundaries, the new district plans that follow will have to give effect to the RPS. So I think that's the framework that we're talking about. But staff, Ben, is that as you understand it?
It is. The complicated, what I was talking about as well, those plan changes in Waimakariri and PC14 are including alternative contours to the one in the
doing that
RPS.
already.
So it might be a question to
okay. So plan change 14 includes the new contours.
Version of them.
Version of them. Okay, gotcha.
That's right.
Just getting the processes, understand that now.
So what we're saying is that is basically wrong. And secondly, you would have all read John Paul Clark's latest submission on behalf of Miles and Equus. And they, in a very polite way, are saying that the CIAL experts are bunnies.
Okay. So Brooke, you're giving us evidence you're given to PC14 hearing or about to give?
Well, about to give.
You're about to give this. So that's, we're running in parallel. So
but that's
that.
What we're asking you to be aware of the bigger picture, please, because if you're not and you embed this, it will litigation, fighting, waste of time, energy, and money. We don't have that luxury. We've got a housing crisis, and unfortunately, the airport, when you look at it in the history, they're our biggest handbrake in the city. Empowering themselves and disadvantaging not only those living under the contours, but the direction of our city. It needs to be rectified, please.
Thank you.
Don't impede the process.
I believe that seeing representatives from the councils here, surely they realise there is a problem here, has been a long-term problem. They realise that there is no doubt that the contours are going to change to at least 55. That is really publicly known now. Why can't they just all sit down together and say, let's take this out, let's all get together with ECAN, sort it out now so we know where we're going instead of waiting until the the end of 2024 for ECAN to make up the mind in their RPS. It's just crazy stuff.
And understand the point. So thank you for presenting. We are out of time.
Thank you.
We've had some good questions and thanks for the clarification and really appreciate you coming and presenting us your submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As Adele, they'll come forward from Christchurch NZ. And Adele, you've given us some speaking notes of we've got in front of us.
Yes.
Thank you. So welcome.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, ko Adele Radburn toko ingoa. I am speaking on behalf of Christchurch NZ today. Christchurch NZ is Otatahi Christchurch's economic development agency. Our purpose is to stimulate regenerative economic growth for a more prosperous city. Our functions now include urban development with a mandate to create and implement long-term growth and development plans with multi-sector partners and to lead and invest in implementation projects to create attractive and thriving places. Just as background to me, I am Principal Development Planner in Christchurch NZ's Urban Development team. I'm leading a project to consider the future growth opportunity of the area, which we call south of Morehouse or SOMO, which I will discuss shortly. Prior to my current role, I worked as a Principal Planner for Christchurch City Council's strategic planning team. A key part of my role was overseeing the commercial and industrial chapters of the Christchurch District Plan and contributing to sub-regional growth planning as part of the Greater Christchurch Partnership Council officer team. I helped prepare the last future development strategy and I was a lead author of the partnership's last business land capacity assessment. I therefore have a good understanding of land capacity assessments, spatial planning, and the requirements of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development. Today, I would like to focus just on two aspects of our submission: commercial land supply figures and priority development areas. CNZ sought that the commercial land supply figures cited in the draft spatial plan be revisited because in our view, they significantly undercount commercial development capacity with the potential for perverse outcomes, and those perverse outcomes are already playing out. We also sought that the area south of Morehouse be identified as a priority development area. The officer's report has not recommended any changes in response to these submissions. On that first issue of commercial land supply, our submission questioned the 110 hectare commercial land shortfall identified for Christchurch City and supported by the business capacity assessment. Just as a bit of context, the large district centre that's planned for North Warsaw is 17 hectares. So it's a big shortfall that's been identified. The supporting text, the table 4, says that whilst there is a 110 hectare shortfall, this can be met through intensification of centres, as well as through the rezoning of industrial land close to the central city. And to some extent that is true, but redevelopment capacity has not been assessed, nor has existing floor space been counted, nor has the capacity directed to be enabled by Plan Change 14 be counted, nor has capacity permitted outside of commercial zones been included, and that can be considerable. It can be up to a third of capacity. In our view, if that plan-enabled capacity had been counted, the shortfall would probably be, probably wouldn't exist, but at best it would be much less. On page 116 of the officer's report, the officers agree that the capacity is likely to have been undercounted and that consequently there is a low risk of a shortage of commercial land in the long term. However, they maintain that the capacity estimates are reasonable and no change to the sufficiency figures is recommended. So it still shows 110 hectare shortfall. In addition, the officers have not recommended any changes to the report where it says that inner city industrial land is available to plug that gap, despite that land now being proposed for housing, not commercial, through Plan Change 14. So why does it matter? It is important to have robust and accurate modelling to inform decision making. That's why government has spent so much time and effort providing guidance on how council should do it. The public, developers and infrastructure providers need to be able to rely on it. Councils need to be very clear about when there is a shortfall and how it will be addressed to ensure the operation of competitive and well-functioning land markets. And we also need to make sure that we don't enable too much commercial land capacity outside of our current network of centres, because that may undermine those centres and all the significant investment in those. If there is a shortfall, there is an expectation in the NPS that more land or space will be made available to meet that need. It would be quite reasonable for a developer to rely on the spatial plan's cited shortfall to promote greater commercial activity in areas not currently intended for it. If it isn't actually needed, it could have a significant impact on existing centres, including the central city. That is not a fanciful proposition. Just this month, Kāinga Ora's planning witness for PC14 specifically referenced the 110 hectare shortfall that is identified in this draft spatial plan as justification for enabling greater commercial activity in parts of the city where it isn't currently allowed. If government agencies involved in the development of the spatial plan don't realise that a shortfall isn't really a shortfall, how can anyone else be expected to realise that? Accordingly, we continue to seek that the commercial sufficiency figures be updated to reflect a more accurate assessment of capacity. Turning to the second issue, and this talks to the map on the screen. Christchurch NZ also sought the identification of a large area in excess of 100 hectares of industrial land south of Morehouse as a priority development area. It includes the land immediately surrounding the recently redeveloped Lancaster Park and all of the land broadly between Morehouse and Brougham Streets. It is strategically located within the walkable catchment of the central city and is capable of delivering at least half of the city's long-term need for housing. The land has been notified as part of Plan Change 14 as a future high-density growth area. Essentially, it's a car-light apartment zone. It has done this because of the government's direction to intensify in areas within the walkable catchment of the central city. Recognising that the area doesn't currently have the amenity expected for a high-quality residential or mixed-use neighbourhood, the proposed rules for PC14 for the zone really try to raise the bar for housing. They prescribe minimum densities and typologies, mandate tree planting and communal green space. It really is trying to do density done well and respond to market failure to deliver housing that is diverse and affordable and attractive to buyers. The proposed rules also recognise that the city has quite a job to do in terms of reducing our transport emissions, and that this area could do much of the heavy lifting in terms of VKT and emissions reductions by focusing on active and low carbon transport. If supported by investment in urban infrastructure, particularly active transport and urban greening, it could lead the way in Ōtautahi Christchurch and even nationally in terms of implementing innovative low-carbon neighbourhood renewal as encouraged by government's emissions reductions plan. We cannot think of any other area in Greater Christchurch that has as much potential to do this. CNZ sought that the area be included within the Central City Priority Development Area, if not on its own, as it meets the technical criteria, although the assessment I note has not been published as far as I'm aware, and would enable relevant agencies to contribute to the area's future planning. We think it is appropriate that the GCP, particularly central government as a partner, should have a role in supporting areas that the government itself has mandated to intensify to 6 stories or more through the NPSUD, like this area. All other 6-storey intensification areas in the city have been included as priority development areas in the spatial plan, and we wonder why this area has not been included. Officers provide a reasonably fulsome response to our submission on page 121, giving various reasons for not including the area at this time. Key to this is the perception that it will detract from growth in the central city and along MRT corridors. We disagree. It'll be some time before the market in SOMO will take up the opportunity here. Starting to think about the area's future now gets us ahead of the curve. It helps us to be resilient to future shocks and stresses in the same way that area planning for the southwest of Christchurch in the early 2000s meant that it was ready to accommodate thousands of displaced residents when the earthquakes hit. We are not asking partnership agencies to down tools on other priority areas to focus on this one, but rather to acknowledge the opportunity of this area and to contribute to the planning and investment decisions around it. Without identification as a PDA, we fear that the opportunity will be diminished and that we will be playing catch up decades down the road. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Adele. And that's 10 minutes worth of very useful summary of the key issues. So thank you so much for putting it together. I've got a couple of questions myself, but before I do, I'll go to the panel. Bobby.
So I'm aware that, along Carlisle, they're older, but once you get down Wordsworth, you're into very established business areas.
Yep.
What do you think their views would be to your submission?
Well, it's early days in terms of planning for the area and engaging with that community. I can only go by what happened with Plan Change 14. Plan Change 14, all of these all these businesses were notified, and there was not a single submission. So I know, take what you can from that, but I would have thought if there was significant opposition to it, they would have made their views known. I guess the key thing about the land use change in this area is that it doesn't require businesses to do anything now. So it's a flexible zoning that enables the change to happen as and when businesses want to, or developers want to take up the opportunity. It's exactly the same as the Central City mixed use zone, where industrial, commercial, residential is all allowed. So when people are ready and want to take up those opportunities to transition, to sell their land, whatever, that zone flexibility is there for them. But I agree with you that there are parts of this area that are more ready now to transition. And we're already seeing quite a lot of that happening. The area around Lancaster Park, of course, is ripe for it not to be industrial and to be high density housing. So there will be some areas that are likely to be taken up sooner than others.
Thank you, Adele. Any other questions? Victoria?
Thank you. Hi, Adele.
Hi.
You, as the Economic Development Agency for Christchurch, were you engaged with in the early stages in the development of the draft spatial plan?
Not in any meaningful way, I would say.
Okay, and so you reference in your submission that you want some clarification around the expectations relating to your role going forward in terms of the joint work program. Have you got any thoughts on what that could look like? And
no, sorry, I didn't cover that off in my presentation, obviously, but that point was around there is mention in the draft spatial plan to us being involved in an economic development strategy. So we were querying what that meant because we've just gone through developing a new economic ambition. And so that arguably is that. So we were questioning really what is that? As far as I'm aware, there haven't been discussions around what that is, and there haven't been discussions about, whether that's on our work program and whether we've been funded to do that.
Sure.
So there's a question mark, I suppose, still.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can pick that up with the officers.
Well, I think we should raise this as a point. So in terms of the implementation part of the plan, you frame the question.
Thinking on my feet, I'm not sure what the question is at the moment.
Just generally,
I'm keen to understand what the officers' thoughts are around the expectations and the collaboration with CNZ in respect to the joint work program going forward.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Kate. You had a question?
Sorry, I had one more.
Yeah,
just really quickly. You also noted in your submission that you requested that the plan be bolder in the ambition and direction to transition to a low carbon economy.
Yes.
What did you have in mind?
I thought someone might answer that question, and it's not really, I guess, for us to come up with what it might be, but I mean, looking to the emissions reductions plan is probably a useful start, and there's some key directions just from my own perspective on low carbon low carbon neighbourhoods, for example. That could be something that could come through the spatial plan in terms of being really taking a proactive role in terms of what that means, because the focus is really on urban form, and I understand that, but it's, can we do more? Can we be more directive in this plan so that it paves the way for when we need to take hard decisions down the track? It provides the support for councils, etc., to do that.
Mr. Chair, through you, I think it would be useful for the panel to have eyes over the recent document that's been prepared and released by Christchurch NZ in respect of their economic development
ambition
for the city, which is underpinned by a North Star of a regenerative economy.
Yeah.
So I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. Kate.
Sure. Thanks, Adele, for that submission. I was quite interested in terms of the partnership approach to the spatial plan. You referenced a kind or a submission, I'm assuming, to a resource consent hearing?
It was evidence to Plan Change 14 just recently. And my notes that have been circulated, I've got the link to that.
Right. And you indicated, just so that I can be clear, that they had talked about a shortfall, even though, as
they specifically referenced the 110 hectares that's shortfall that's in the spatial plan draft.
Thank you for that.
Grant.
Thank you. I'm just reading from your submission, and your concern that you were keen to have this identified as a additional priority development area.
Yeah.
But you also suggest that PC 14, which, as you've said, will change it to a mixed use kind of arrangement, has the potential to accommodate many thousands of homes.
Yes.
Do you think that is sufficient, that there's no need for it to be developed as a priority development area, because in a way that will that in itself achieve that in terms of PC 14?
So PC 14 is a really important first step. It's the regulatory side of things, so it's the enablement, but on its own, it's not going to create a well-functioning urban environment. It needs the support, particularly investment in the street. The biggest opportunity, in my view, is around changes to the street, using the street better and greening. And there's also ageing infrastructure that we could do better. There's potential for land acquisition to support new parks and things like that. So Plan Change 14 doesn't do that. It can only go so far.
Just follow up. I mean, sometimes the City Council, Christchurch City Council, will identify an area and create an improvement plan.
Yes.
Is that the process that's likely to happen here?
Yes, in the same way, I suppose, as with Hornby and Riccarton and Papanui, they've all been identified as priority development areas for basically local area planning. It's to get everyone that really has an interest or some tools to bring to the process in the project team to work together for local area planning. It's just that these areas are normally it happens in a sort of a smaller scale neighbourhood sense, but these are quite different propositions.
Thank you.
Adele, I have two quite specific questions. You're seeking this change to the commercial man supply number.
Sorry, say again?
You're seeking a change to the shortfall number in the spatial plan?
Yes.
On commercial land?
Yep.
What is your number that you think we should adopt?
I don't have a number. I haven't done the modelling.
Okay. So
but I know it has to be there's a significant gap. There has to be a significant gap.
So you're asking for the figure to be updated to reflect a more accurate assessment.
Yes.
So, but you haven't put forward, is that something, is this a model where numbers can be rerun, or is that another model modelling exercise?
So it's just following the modelling approach that is required by the NPSUD.
Yes.
But there are some gaps. So I fundamentally don't have any issue with the demand figures in the model. The issue is that the supply side, so the demand's fine, the supply side is only counted vacant land. And of course, that's not all the capacity. There's gaps. So you need to be able to count what more capacity is enabled as you go higher through PC14. All the space, and there's a significant amount of space that hasn't been counted within existing buildings that's empty. And Selwyn and Waimakariri both look at redevelopment capacity in their modelling, but the city hasn't. So it's a deficiency that existed in the last capacity assessment as well, but it was meant to be rectified. I do understand there's work underway by the council to look at it, to plug that gap. But it needs a modelling approach. It needs an economic modelling approach, and so I haven't done that myself.
You haven't done it yourself.
Yeah.
So that's to frame a question for the council staff, just to give us an update on what I seem to agree that the number's not right from what I read from your analysis, but if we're going to have a number in this spatial plan that's looking at 30 years, do we get a response from the council staff on where they're up with that modelling? Second question is, you're talking about the SOMO, and that's in Plan Change 14 as an intensification area. It's part of the CBD walkable catchment.
Yes, it is.
Where buildings can go up to 6 stories. That's supported by Kaingaora.
My understanding that Kaingaora's position currently is support for a smaller area.
Okay.
So the notified proposal has all the yellow that's on that map, and it's still to go to hearing, but my understanding is that they are in support of the area around Lancaster and pretty much the area, a central bit of basically excluding those blocks towards Waltham Road. So that the blocks that were mentioned before around Wordsworth Street to be excluded. And the basis for Kaingaora's support for that smaller area, it's still a big area, but is so that investment can be focused more easily on a confined area. And there's merit in that.
Can someone point out Lancaster Park to me? Oh, there it is there. Okay.
The actual park's under the label.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the old Lancaster Park.
Old Lancaster Park.
And can you, someone home in on me where the area that Kaingaora is supporting?
Okay, here I've got control of this actually. I didn't realise. So, so obviously all this area, and then pretty much from a line down here.
Yes.
To about here.
So
but it excludes this bit here, which personally I think should be in because it's really close to Hagley Park and everything. And it excludes this area, which is really a lot more industrial. The irony, though, is that the land's better here and it's closer to supermarkets and ARA and all of those sort of amenities. That
yeah, and this is discussion hasn't been presented to the panel, PC14 panel, and they'll make a decision on this.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Understand that. Adele, thank you so much for coming. We've gone a bit over time, so better move on. Thank you for your submissions. Right, we're moving now to Sarah and Fraser, who are coming online by Zoom, I think, from Infinity Investment Group Holdings.
You've got half an hour. One on Zoom, one in person.
Okay, so we've got half an hour. So, is that right? Oh, all right. Okay, so we've got a hybrid.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Sarah Eveley. I am here today with Mr. Colgrave for Infinity Investment Group Holdings.
Thank you.
We have pre-circulated some submissions as well as Mr. Colgrave's evidence, which appends a report that he has recently prepared.
Thank you.
In the time available, I thought I would take you briefly through my submissions. And particularly, we've also circulated a amended version of the spatial plan, setting out the amendments sought by Infinity, and then hand over to Mr. Colgrave. So Infinity is a leading provider of residential development in the South Island within Greater Christchurch that has included Pegasus Town, Ravenswood and Yaldhurst Park. In summary, Infinity's submission is directed towards 2 points. First of all, the provision of housing capacity, in particular the reliance on intensification of existing urban areas with limited provision for greenfield development. And secondly, the airport noise contour issue. The spatial plan's intended to satisfy the requirements of a future development strategy. In my submissions, I've set out that the purpose and requirements for a future development strategy as per the MPSUD. I expect you've been taken to those a number of times in the course of your hearing. So just to really highlight there, that focuses around achieving a well-functioning urban environment with at least sufficient housing capacity. It requires that the future development strategy identify broad locations where realisable housing capacity can be provided to meet specific demand for housing in terms of dwelling type, price and location to achieve a competitive and affordable housing market. In our submission, the spatial plan is currently drafted fails to do that. Turning to the first issue in terms of housing capacity, the primary concern there is the lack of identification of broad locations for new greenfield residential areas. Mr. Colgrave will take you through his assessment of that approach, but in summary, it results in the spatial plan not making sufficient provision for standalone housing, which is predominantly provided through greenfield development. It requires an unrealistic step change in housing typology and preference towards multi-unit development, which will not match consumer demand. It limits the location of new housing provided through intensification to a select number of suburbs within Christchurch City, with assessed feasible capacity heavily concentrated in the city's more expensive suburbs. It will adversely affect housing affordability and competitive land and development markets, and as a result, it doesn't meet the purpose and requirements of a future development strategy or the NPSUD. The officer's recommendations on that point include some amendments around identification of broad locations for future growth. Those amendments relate to both intensification and new greenfield areas. In my submission, that approach doesn't satisfy the requirement for the spatial plan to identify the broad locations rather than how they would be considered in future. It's my submission also that those criteria are unsuitable for application to greenfield areas generally. The first 2 points talk about being adjoined to a significant urban centre, major town or locally important urban centre, and being accessible to some higher frequency transport routes. We generally find our greenfield locations are at the periphery of the existing urban area, and they involve rezoning of rural land. And because of that nature of those areas, they don't satisfy those first 2 criteria. Our suggestion is that that be made specific to intensification, and that for greenfield areas, there's a reliance on the other greenfield criteria included in the spatial plan with some amendment. So in terms of those specific amendments, the first is around amending opportunity 4 and overarching direction 1, so that those are more consistent with the requirements of the NPSUD, identifying elements around housing type, price and location, and the contribution of greenfield areas to providing housing capacity. So amendment to section 4.2, which currently sets out what is described as, I think, not being a significant issue to provide housing capacity in Greater Christchurch, and the current capacity assessments, which, as Mr. Colgrave will identify, are flawed. And then some of those changes that I've just discussed in terms of broad locations and the greenfield criteria. Infinity also seek identification of a broad location for greenfield growth adjacent to existing development in Yaldhurst. And those locations are shown in my submissions and in the original submission. But, those locations are currently under the airport noise contours, and so that takes me to the second point around airport noise contours. As will be apparent from the presentations you've already heard, that's a matter under considerable debate at the moment. We support the officers, the direction of the officers changes to make it clear that those are matters that should be determined through the regional policy statement process, but have sought some further amendment to that part of the spatial plan to make it clear that it's both the modelling of the contours, which contour, and the policy framework and management measures under those contours, which are all to be determined. We also sought some further amendments for consistency around a change from avoiding development under contours to managing that development. At that point, watching the clock, I'll hand over to Mr. Colgrave.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me along. Ms. Everly's obviously covered off a lot of the things that in my report, but I'll just delve into a couple of points. So the two issues that I see with the draft spatial plan. So come back a step. Draft spatial plan is a very critical document. I think it brings together a lot of really useful facts and figures. And so it's a great starting point for that journey. But there are some significant gaps and some significant issues. The failure to provide enough greenfield land is the first one. And I think everyone accepts that intensification will become an increasingly important part of our housing future, but we can't expect to sort of get there too quickly. And along the way, we need to make sure we have enough greenfields land available. So over the last 5 years, Greenfield has accounted for virtually all new housing in the two districts, and it's accounted for 80% of all new standalone homes built in the city over the last 5 years. So it is a really important piece of the puzzle. But as far as I can tell, the latest reporting shows we've only got 6,000 sections of greenfields capacity left in the city. And based on current uptake rates, that's about 5 or 6 years worth of supply left. And then beyond that point, there will be no greenfields left in the city. And we'll be relying 100% on intensification. And that's a really big step change in terms of meeting preferences and needs. And even the latest housing capacity assessment, it is very candid. It says, look, we actually don't know about what it is that people find important in terms of the trade-offs they make about where they live and how they do that. And it's very open and says, look, we really need to do a lot more work to understand how we get people into intensification options. So there's an admission there that there's a big gap there in terms of our understanding. But at the same time, the draft spatial plan sort of, I guess, implicitly assumes that everyone will end up in a home in an existing urban area. And that's just going to be unlikely and very difficult. And the upshot of not having enough greenfields land is that, first of all, you're not sort of meeting those consumer needs and preferences. There's a long list of surveys that the City Council does, which looks at the housing preferences, and the responses to those every year are that standalone homes are the most preferred typology. So that's clearly the sort of living that people are very interested in having. That's not to say that the other ones aren't important, but we know that sort of housing is important, but we're not in a position where we can provide it. So we're not meeting those preferences, we're not meeting those needs. But more importantly, there's impacts on competition. So, once you run out of sort of greenfields land, your housing supply is really all about the redevelopment or subdivision of existing sections. And that will certainly occur at some rate, but it's a very slow process because it's seldom financially viable to pull a house down and then build 2 or 3 in its place. So even though the theoretical modelling might say there's a lot of capacity in those existing urban areas, it's actually very difficult to realise it unless the sections are empty. So we're going to have a competition issue. When you have a lack of competition, then obviously you have flow-on effects for prices and all that kind of thing. So there's some pretty significant issues there. And related to that, Formative, a consulting company, was commissioned to do some analysis of the affordability effects of the three sort of main urban form options that went into the draft spatial plan. And their work actually revealed that the compact option, which the draft spatial plan has sort of aligned itself with, is the least affordable. And the most affordable option of all of them is actually a dispersed urban form, where we have a bit of a balance between intensification and greenfield. So we're probably not meeting those housing choices. We're definitely having a detrimental effect on competition. And at the same time, modelling that's been done behind this shows that the option that we've sort of moved away from very strongly is the one that will have the greatest sort of affordability effect. So those are sort of the headline issues, I guess, in terms of what happens when we don't have enough greenfields land. And I think the reason we've got here, there's a couple of things. The first one is that we're relying on some housing capacity numbers that just don't make sense. They don't stack up. I can go through the detail on those if you're interested, but essentially we're starting with some very, very large plan enabled capacity figures, which are not tested for infrastructure readiness. They're not whittled down to reflect what's likely to be realised, and the calculation of the sort of the feasible capacity, which is that final step. There's a lot of technical issues in there. I won't get into that, but essentially the capacity estimates that sort of underpin this have some serious question marks around them. On the other side of the ledger, what comes through very strongly when you read what's called the Urban Form Scenarios report. So that's a report that was done to analyse different urban form scenarios and figure out which direction we want to take. When you analyse that report, it becomes clear to me, at least, that there was a very strong ideological preference for a specific outcome. And a lot of the evaluation and reporting and the commentary that's in that report kind of defies the numbers that sit beneath it. And when you dig a bit deeper down and you sort of look at the conclusions that are reached and you look at the analysis beneath it, they don't sort of match up. And there seems to be potentially a drive towards a certain outcome, even though that might not make sense. And one of the really big issues that comes through this is the desire to curb greenhouse gas emissions. And everybody agrees we need to do that. I think everyone's on board. We want to decarbonise the transport fleet and all of those interesting terms. But it's really important that we don't do that in a way that has other effects. So as we've mentioned, we'll have some effects on competition and affordability. So that there are some risks and some costs from going down this path. So if we're going to take those economic costs and risks, we've got to be really clear that it's worth it. But when you look at the modelling beneath this, what it shows is that even if you adopt the compact urban form, which the draft spatial plan sort of adopts, if you take that scenario, which is a very high density approach that doesn't even comply with NPSUD requirements, and then you overlay what I sort of call the utopian transport package. It's a whole lot of these transport initiatives and assumptions, which are, really quite optimistic. When you bring those two things together, you only reduce private vehicle trips by a maximum of 1%. And so it becomes clear that while it makes sense on paper to pursue this compact urban form to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it doesn't really work. And there's a few reasons. I'll just quickly mention them. The first one is that this is a mature city. It's a mature sub-region. We have 550,000 people living across these three territorial authorities. So a lot of that sort of urban form structure is already baked in. And so the changes that will happen from here on are very much tinkering at the margin. So even if you pursue a very compact urban form in terms of the location of new jobs and homes, because we already have 550,000 people, it doesn't really make a difference. The other one is that cars are actually a very small proportion of greenhouse gas emissions. So nationally and at the regional level, they're about 8% of CO2 emissions. And the other bit is that not only are cars a very small part of that puzzle, but they're also becoming a lot better and a lot cleaner over time through movements to hybrids and electric cars, or just lower emission models themselves. So, by micromanaging the locations of jobs and homes through the draft spatial plan, we're sort of tinkering with that 8% of a bigger part of a puzzle, which itself is already getting smaller over time because the fleet is getting cleaner. And so, there's no doubt in my mind that the spatial plan is trying to do the right thing. And, it's trying to give effect to these very ambitious policy targets that central government has placed on us. But the reality is that when you boil it all down, it doesn't take us anywhere on that journey towards reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but it has some pretty serious effects on competition in markets and affordability and housing choice. So I guess that's kind of the crux of my work. And just very quickly on the noise contours, we performed a pretty detailed review, I guess, of the information that sits behind the latest thinking for this in terms of the work that's been done for Plan Change 14. And a series of reports were put forward for Plan Change 14. We've reviewed those in some detail. What became immediately apparent to us through that is that the airport's position is a bit of an outlier, and the reporting done on its behalf, it admits this very clearly. It says, well, actually, Christchurch International Airport is the only one in New Zealand who sets this outer control boundary at the 50 decibel level instead of 55. So it's an outlier locally, but even globally, the equivalent of those boundaries overseas is set at a different level. So it's a very conservative view. And that might be okay if we had a lot of housing choice, but the reality is that in the city, particularly, we've got the red zoned areas towards the east. We now know that through the coastal inundation work and sea level rise and all the qualifying matters that have come through Plan Change 14, we now know that eastern side of the city is really not going to be a place where we want future development. So it is going to be pushed out to the west, where obviously the rebuild has focused post-quake. And so as we move away from the east, out to the west, we then find ourselves under the contours. So we're sort of squeezed in the middle. And I think
Adele, I think you're going to have to stop here because you're well over time. Fraser, sorry to cut you off in full flight.
It's fine.
So look, I'll leave with a couple of questions. Firstly, just to cut through. Firstly, Adele, your legal submissions are that, and I'll quote from your paragraph 13 of your legal submissions. In my submission, the current spatial plan fundamentally fails to meet these requirements. This is implementing the future development strategies and the requirements of the NPSUD. That's your legal opinion?
That's right.
Okay, so I just would like, we've heard from the council staff quite clearly in their report that they believe it does meet all the requirements. We go into a number of reasons. This is a question for the officer team. Given, and we've heard this from other submitters, given the challenges that are being made to the legality, I suppose, of the spatial plan and meeting those national policy statement directives, we really need the officers to produce a response to these legal criticisms, and would be expecting to see some further analysis from the officer team in some form. It may lead to an additional legal opinion based on perhaps what Sarah's put forward and other lawyers. So I just wanted to record that. The second thing, it's really about your evidence, Fraser. You've attached a report called Economic Peer Review of the Greater Christchurch Draft Spatial Plan. That is dated 31st of October. That's Tuesday this week.
Yes.
So is that right? So you've just finished this. You also note that you're acting for Kāinga Ora on Plan Change 14.
Yes.
So is your report for Kāinga Ora and being presented as part of the Plan Change 14 statement of evidence, or is it being produced for your current client, Infinity Investment Group?
The peer review report is for the draft spatial plan process. The work for Kāinga Ora is a very focused piece of work looking at the benefits of intensification around the three largest centres, essentially, sir.
Okay, so we've just seen this. The officers have just seen this. So again, a general question for the officers: would like some commentary or response to this economic peer review. It's a lot of work. Obviously, we can't even ask any questions on it because it's just sort of hit us today. So not saying it in a derogatory way. It's just the timing issue. So look, on that basis and the basis that we're running behind time, does the panel have any specific questions? No. Thank you, Adele, for your comprehensive submissions. And thank you very much, Fraser, for your report and your summary, which you did at a real quick basis, which we had to do just with the timeframes we've got. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Colgrave's also appearing for other submitters this afternoon,
yes.
And I will be back
Okay.
tomorrow with very similar submissions. So,
all right. So this is where we heard that you've got half an hour, but not in a row. Is that right? Are you going to come back and talk to us about this report, Fraser, this afternoon?
Yes, I'm on at 2 o'clock, sir.
2 o'clock. Okay, we'll hear back from you then, and Adele will see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so Chris Ford. Chris, are you here?
Yes, I am. Kia ora, Chair. Yes, I am indeed.
Hey, Chris.
Kia ora, Chair and councillors. Kia ora, Chair, panel members, members of the public. DPA, Disabled Persons Assembly, welcomes this opportunity to engage with the hearings panel on a draft spatial plan being proposed by the Greater Christchurch Partnership Collaboration. We see the plan as presenting an opportunity for the growth of Aotearoa Christchurch, which is facing huge challenges due to being the largest city in the South Island and with significant population growth projected to continue. As we pointed out in our submission, for disabled people, accessibility needs to be seen not just as an add-on, but an essential and central component of planning for Greater Christchurch's growth over the next 30 years. According to the 2013 Statistics New Zealand Disability Survey, 1 in 4 New Zealanders have a disability or long-term health condition. Māori and Pacific peoples have an even higher than average rate of disability. The number of disabled people in Christchurch's population is also projected to increase over the next 30 years due to the high incidence of ageing within the population, amongst other factors. Given the 2013 Disability Survey's figures and factoring in the draft plan's projections of a 700,000 to 1 million population of Greater Christchurch by 2051, this could mean, excuse me, that there could be anywhere between 140,000 and 200,000 disabled people living within the region by that time. Building an inclusive Christchurch where everyone, including disabled people, can fully participate in their communities without barriers, needs to be an overriding objective of all Greater Christchurch area in terms of this plan. We also emphasise the importance of having disabled people involved as co-design partners in all planning and policy-making decisions regarding the spatial plan. I will go through the 4 main challenges we face as a disabled community, not only in Greater Christchurch, but nationwide. The first is housing. The housing situation for disabled people is dire in Christchurch as much as it is around the country. This means that disabled people are disproportionately impacted by homelessness and therefore live in either unsuitable or inaccessible housing. This is in part due to disabled people being overrepresented amongst low-income earners and renters, while also facing higher living costs due to disability. Disabled people are also at greater risk of homelessness due to the lack of security around ongoing tenancy, and this is exacerbated by the low number of accessible homes in Christchurch. The second is transport. The spatial plan needs to accommodate the transport needs of all disabled people across different modes, including driving, busing, walking, cycling, taxis, and trains. There is a clear need for improved transport accessibility and affordability for disabled people as a key component of urban planning efforts going forward. Disabled people need to have accessible transport options available, including fully accessible buses, taxis, and trains. Accessible, affordable transport is so vital if we are, as disabled people, to have access to everyday life in our communities, including to employment, education and training, shopping, recreation, and healthcare. We would also like to see the separation of cycling and walking spaces so that they are parallel to one another and not one single space. This would ensure the safety of both pedestrians and cyclists, including disabled people who are at greater risk of being injured in collisions. The third is climate change. The disabled community is already being hit by the impacts of climate change, as evidenced by the recent floods in Auckland, Hawke's Bay and elsewhere just in the last year, and are expected to be one of the hardest hit population groups going forward locally, nationally and internationally. The combined impacts of climate change and sea level rise could mean that mitigation measures or managed retreat may be needed in coastal areas of Greater Christchurch, like New Brighton, and in areas where there is an increased flooding risk. Compared with other centres, Christchurch has the advantage of being able to expand into flat terrain, which is of considerable value to many disabled people, especially people with mobility impairments who use wheelchairs and other mobility devices. With all of the above factors in mind, we'd like to reiterate our recommendations, which we believe will make the future Greater Christchurch area a more accessible, inclusive, and climate resilient region for everyone to live in, including disabled people. Our first recommendation is that the Greater Christchurch Partnerships Council stakeholders review the appropriateness of allowing new house and commercial building activity in areas deemed at high risk of flooding or sea level rise. Our second recommendation is that the Greater Christchurch Partnership Stakeholders Partnership with disabled people, tangata whaikaha and whānau hawa disabled Māori, whānau disabled Māori, and disability organisations to plan any managed retreat from existing communities. Our third recommendation is that access to Greater Christchurch's present and future natural areas be supported through the construction and or upgrading of facilities to universal design standards. Our fourth recommendation is that enabling accessible housing be added to the opportunity for goal to read, quote, enabling diverse, accessible and affordable housing, unquote. Our fifth recommendation is that the Greater Christchurch Councils incentivise the building of more compact, accessible to life mark universal design standards housing and public buildings through the use of capital contributions. Our sixth recommendation is that the final spatial plan fully incorporate universal design standards, at least to level 5, to ensure accessibility. Our seventh recommendation is that the Greater Christchurch Councils undertake barrier-free audits to determine what changes are needed in all communities. Our eighth recommendation is that fully accessible transport is added to the Opportunity 6 goal as follows, quote, prioritise sustainable and accessible transport choices, unquote. Our final recommendation is that all public transport, including buses, taxis, trains and ferries, be fully accessible for everyone, including disabled people. DPA has laid its recommendations on the table, and we would like to see all Greater Christchurch councils pick up on them by working alongside disabled people and disability organisations to plan a better future. Chair, over to you and the panel for any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris, and very thorough submission, and you've done very well summarising it in the 7 or 8 minutes that you've had. So thank you for that. I'll ask for questions from the panel. Nicole.
thanks so much for your submission, and it's great to hear what you've said, because I mean, essentially we're all going to be in that situation, have some disability as we get older, and I particularly, when I had young kids, really realised how inaccessible some places are. So thank you for making the effort to give us this presentation. I'm just more interested in the Universal Design LifeMark Standard 5 that you're talking about. Have other councils implemented that in their plans? How has that been implemented, or
yes,
or has it?
Yes, we understand that Auckland Council have a Universal Design guidebook, that the guidelines that they've developed and that are accessible via the Auckland Council website. I should have incorporated them in our submission. Nonetheless, they're there, and that's what we understand to be the case. And so they've developed those guidelines. So we draw out the Christchurch Council's attention to those.
Thank you.
Victoria?
Thank you, Chris. Can I just pick up on the Universal Design Standards again, where you refer to that under your recommendation 3 in relation to natural areas? Just checking that you've seen the officers' report in that respect, where they've included that particular aspect with a new paragraph. Important that green spaces within our urban environments can be enjoyed by people of all ages, abilities, including through inclusive design and the application of universal design standards. So just checking that you're comfortable with that officer recommendation.
Yes, I am. We are comfortable with that recommendation, and I hadn't seen it prior to your drawing it to my attention, but anyway, that is a very positive development.
Yes, more generally, Chris, we do have, it's online, the officers' recommendations to us on the Greater Christchurch webpage. So they've responded to some of your submissions and have recommended some changes. So that's just an example.
That's great.
So in your own time, have a look at that. I think you'll find that helpful. Other questions? Grant?
Just following up on a couple of your comments. One of them you mentioned about the avoidance of natural hazard developing places and where the high natural hazards. And also you mentioned they were fortunate we can develop on sort of flat terrain. We've had lots of discussions about building in greenfield sites, allowing more space in greenfield sites, and that argument in terms of the complications of intensifying in brownfield sites. In terms of your presentation, and in terms of accessibility, is a more compact form, does that create, in terms of the balance between greenfield versus intensified places, is intensified places give your disability movement more a better quality living environment, or what's the distinction between the two?
Well, I think that would require us to come back with perhaps a further submission or clarification for you, as that's quite an interesting question, but we will get back to you about that, because it's something that we need to sort of discuss a wee bit further, perhaps.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Other questions? No, thank you very much, Chris, and certainly put any further information through to our secretariat email. Thanks you for your time, and I appreciate you coming on to talk to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ka kite.
Ka kite. All right, we're moving to Gareth. Gareth, are you here? Welcome, and make yourself at home.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Gareth Hayman aho, here kai whakahaere toku mai Aotearoa, New Zealand. And today I am here to speak to you about transport and the use of new technologies such as cable cars in transport. Firstly, I'd like to thank you and welcome the opportunity to make a submission on the Greater Christchurch Regional Partnership. And I suppose today I am here talking about cable cars, and just for a point of clarification, cable cars, we talk about them in a more general sense in terms of our products. That can be anything from a gondola, a funicular railway, to a big aerial tramway, if you like. I suppose I will take our submission as read, and I suppose there's two items there that I would like to point out there. One is highlighting the opportunity of cable cars within the public transport network of Aotearoa. And the second, I suppose, the importance of spatial planning, allowing for innovation and new technologies to be able to come through and be utilised to ensure that we're able to meet our climate change requirements. In terms of opportunities of cable cars, most people are unaware, and as you will have seen in our submission there, it is a technology that we've been using globally for over 30 years within the public transport space. Predominantly, it's been within South America, and within the last 10 years, it's been starting to migrate towards North America and Europe. And we see the opportunity for cable cars to be integrated into the public transport systems of New Zealand. A few of the key benefits that we see is one is the economics there. Obviously, when we are talking about cost, cable cars are something that can provide extraordinary value while offering some very high capacities, which is quite often required by these MRT systems that are being proposed. Secondly, in terms of the environment there, we think that we have a great advantage in terms of minimising the impact of our environment while still providing a good transport service. In particular, we talk about green space. We minimal impact in terms of our footprint, and also minimal impact in terms of our construction disruption. Additionally, they're being driven by the electric grid, and in New Zealand's case with sustainable energy source, it means that there's zero emissions. When it comes down to greenhouse gas emissions there, we're also thinking about what our whole of life greenhouse gas emissions are, and if you compare a cable car system versus others over its entire lifetime, again, we come out about a quarter of our nearest competitor there in terms of transport. When we talk about social impacts as well, David was just talking about accessibility, and that is one of our greatest strengths of being a completely barrier-free transport mode. We do incorporate universal design, and throughout the South American cities where you'll find our systems, you'll find a decrease in crime and improvements within the communities. So I suppose I'll move to next the importance of spatial planning there. So for about 2 years now, Doppelmayr New Zealand, we've been here in the country for 45 years, which most of it within the Christchurch region. And I suppose we've, in terms of our spatial plans, our resource management there, have national policy statements all focused towards traditional means of transport. I suppose what we're advocating for is for there to be a pathway for innovative transport solutions to be able to come through. Because ultimately, we need to do things differently if we're going to make a change with our climate. In the officer's report there, it does talk about the MRT system, and I suppose the recommendation to continue with the MRT system investigations. We wholeheartedly agree with that. We would point out, I suppose, if you are looking for a turn up and go system, that is something that a gondola system can truly perform. And a great example of that is our cabins. They arrive every 8 to 90 seconds, depending on the design. So if you want to get up and go system, that's what you're going to get. I suppose I'd also just like to point out that in the officer's report there, it did discuss some of the challenges about utilising the heavy rail. And I suppose this is a good example of how a gondola system may be able to supplement other transport modes that are already out there, which is ultimately what we are looking to do in New Zealand. Here it talks about the challenges of connecting the city centre with the current heavy rail system, the lack of stations. Here would be a prime example about where a gondola system could be used to make sure that that connection is there and have a fast and frequent service. So again, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity here and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Gareth. We'll go to Grant for a question.
Let's go. Just seeking clarification. I often think of gondolas as, Queenstown going up a hill.
Mm-hmm.
The sort of gondola that you're thinking about for Christchurch or Greater Christchurch, are you suggesting that if you used gondolas that they would be overhead and they would be elevated, and accessibility to those would be up some kind of route? Could you just explain what your vision is?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose gondolas, there we can traverse across the plains just as efficiently as we can climb the mountains, if you like. A lot of the cities, it obviously is flat. So traditionally, within the cities, a gondola would be 30 metres up in the air. But in terms of the stations and the loadings, they can either come down to ground level or they'll be incorporated into stations that would have elevators and such to enable their level boarding.
Supplementary question. We do have obviously people living in the hills around Port, the base of Port Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a similar system, but it's more, it's same technology, I suppose, or similar technology, but getting people to base station and then up the hill a bit more, is that?
Yes, yeah, very, very similar technology. Yeah.
So in that situation, it's more of a feed, a supplementary feeder from hilltop to lower down to join up with some other sort of transport.
Yeah, that is our vision in terms of integrating with public transport here in New Zealand, is that we would be able to feed into those other systems that are out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Robbie.
Just, sorry, I haven't done my homework well enough. A website that I can look at this from overseas experience, because I can't imagine a gondola going down Riccarton Road.
Yep.
And obviously we had cable cars years ago, but they've gone.
Mm-hmm.
So my homework tonight, can you recommend a website?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to lapaz.docmaya.com, that will show you the city of La Paz in Bolivia, where we've created an entire network within the city of cable cars. So there's over 30 kilometres, 10 different lines. It's almost like a subway network up in the sky.
Thank you. Thank you, Robbie. Gail.
Kia ora. I'm just trying to find where I read it in here, but I can't get touch on it. I thought we had something in here as well about you're also doing like tram style work and monorails and stuff like that. So I'm sure somewhere in here it said all it would need is just putting some tracks down and that it could quite quickly be set up in an interim while a whole lot of other work was being done around mass rapid transport. Was that correct? I was sure I read it in here that you have that.
Yes,
well.
So we do have a similar system to, say, a monorail, a cable liners, which is on an elevated track. But if you take our traditional gondolas as example, traditionally our construction periods are less than 2 years of being able to deliver a transport system. So Paris is actually a great example. We are building down there in the southeast suburbs right now. We started in 2023, and that system will be up and running in 2025.
Right. And so that's on monorail?
No, that's a gondola system.
Okay. And so is there one as well, though, that doesn't require like building up that sort of infrastructure in terms like of a monorail?
Not a street-based system, but an elevated rail system.
Right.
Yeah, there is a
Okay.
system there.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Yes, thank you, Gareth. You've outlined a few fairly populous cities in your submission. What's the sort of urban density that you look for when you're putting in a system of this type?
I suppose as any MRT system, the higher the better, the more value you're going to get for your transport system in terms of your transport capacity. But ultimately, we are looking for our systems can provide, say, anywhere from 500 people per hour transport capacity up to 8,000 people per hour. So we have a wide range, and we can adapt to suit the environment or suit the requirements.
Can you give us those numbers again? So it was, what were the range?
From 500 people per hour up to 8,000 people per hour per direction.
Okay. Any other questions? I've got a couple. Okay, so I'm interested in the Southeast Paris system. We'll be able to look at that online, I presume, as well.
Yes, if you, the transport provider, apologies, my French is not that great, but if you Google Cable One within Paris, that's currently under construction. It's a 4.5 kilometre system that's connecting 5 suburbs, if you like, and is connecting the metro rail with some of the major bus routes whilst protecting their green space.
Okay. And that's servicing 160,000
approximately, yeah,
people. Yeah. Okay, no, that's actually interesting. My second question is that really in your submission at your last paragraph 13, you're generally in support of the draft spatial plan.
Yes.
Is there anything in there that, in terms of the way the words are written, that would restrict your type of service product? Being able to sort of be part of the MRT and connectivity, transport connectivity future for Greater Christchurch?
I haven't found anything specific, but it's ensuring that we include other opportunities. So the National Policy Statement for Urban Development, if you like, that looks specifically at rail, road and ferry services when it talks about mass rapid transit. So we'd like that to be opened up.
That to be extended,
yes,
perhaps.
Yep.
Okay. Yes, Grant.
Does the website have information, or do you have information about approximate costs per kilometre or those sort of things? Does that?
Yes, there's quite a varied range, but a good range for us here in New Zealand would be between, say, $30 to $50 million per kilometre.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much. One of the joys of these sort of hearings is you do get lots of interesting new information. So thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you for the time.
Right, David, are you here from the North Beach Residents Association?
We don't think so.
You don't think so?
But Christopher Kisling is here, I believe, still.
Christopher, let's have you up here if you're here. No, Christopher.
Yes, yeah, just.
Oh, Christopher, could you come up? We're ready for you now.
Thank you very much. Seeing my face for the second time today.
Yes.
I have 2 pieces of documentation that you would have received. In the first one, I actually set up my credentials to start off with. And I don't want to elaborate much upon that, except when I heard this morning the discussion around the airport. I've had students of mine do their master's theses on Christchurch Airport, dealing with matters of what happens if we have a curfew. And the costs of that are quite horrendous, because we only have 2 international airports that can be twins for each other as alternates. So anything that disrupts Christchurch International Airport means an awful lot of extra fuel has to be burnt and detouring, and you burn fuel to carry fuel. The consequences are quite horrendous. But turning now more to what I've put to you, in the first paper I gave you, there are a series of bullet points there about facts to consider. I'm not going to elaborate upon them, they are self-explanatory, I think. I turn then to the heading which says possible improvements. And I'm concentrating here looking at the proposed MRT system. And the second bullet point there, under that heading, I would emphasize the matter of track gauge. If it's not the same as the mainline rail, you're cutting off our noses despite possibilities of integration of services in the future. The reasons for having the same gauge, I elaborate a bit further in my second presentation to you. But before we get to that, you might want to quiz me on some of the bullet points in that section on the first presentation. But I would conclude on that section that there's considerable merit in the proposed mass transit system. However, it could be enhanced by extension and use of existing rail infrastructure. It could be staged further than indicated on the maps on page 39. There is existing technology that can be applied, and there's need to put out a firm plan with timelines that can and will be followed. This mass transit system should be used to help shape the urban agglomeration we call Greater Christchurch. It should not be retrofitting exercise except in the inner city where that is a necessity. To make it all work efficiently, the MRT must shape development rather than be a response to development. And much of the required assessments of things have been done. I was listening as well as I could at the previous speaker as well. But turning to my supplementary.
Christopher, let's hold there. You've asked for questions about your list of ideas for improvements in your submission. So shall we see if there's any that's on the original submission? So does the panel actually have any questions on the possible improvements? They're quite clear to me, so thank you. If you want to move on to your second part now, thank you.
Right, the second part is really looking at how public housing can take place at critical nodes along transport corridors within the transport network using the airspace above those sites. This is not pie in the sky, strange type wishful thinking. It happens in other parts of the world. That land, the road space, the transport corridors is not in private hands, it's publicly owned. And what I'm arguing for here is that we need to integrate some of the development, which is a part of the policies for integrating transport, mass transport with housing in a way that is very effective. It can be done in the rural areas extensions I talked about in the first part. It can be done within Christchurch itself. And I mentioned various points A to I where some of the benefits will flow. This would not be a complete list, but just an example. So the concept fits constructing over road and rail corridors. And I turned to the point about what if the rail freight system was completely removed from the existing rail corridor from Tower Junction through to Sticks Mill, because there used to be, and I remember it, designation for the rail to go from Sticks Mill via the airport to Hornby. And that designation got uplifted. Political reasons or whatever, I don't know what the reasons were, but to my mind, that was backward thinking, and we could use it right now because it would free up the main North Line for your mass rapid transit system.
Christopher, when did that get uplifted?
I was with the Canterbury Regional Council as 2IC to Malcolm Douglas back in those days, and so it's
probably 15 years ago.
60s.
60s, okay, United Council, gosh, all right.
We can get you the exact date if you want to.
I'm just interested to know.
It's in the history books, datable. You'd have to buy back the land again to do it, but it gives you good access to the airport as for freight and things, air freight and things like that as well.
So what was the name that that project was given, or that designation? Has it got a?
Well, it was part of the Christchurch Regional Master Plan.
Master Plan, but was it called a something link, or is it called a? What was the name of the project?
I can't remember that exactly, but it's certainly the hiving off of that designation because nothing was happening on it, so they got rid of it after 5 years, or was whatever the times frame was. Yeah. Also, other stupidity in my mind was when they got rid of the curvature of the rail at Tower Junction, so you couldn't come running around to the old main railway station onto Littleton. You had to do back and shut and whatnot through the marshalling yards. Okay. I make points that spatial planning is not two-dimensional; it's three-dimensional. It's the up and down of buildings and things, as well as the transverse. And so you've got to think in terms of how people can be access between high-rise buildings in the central city area, in other cities overseas, and Hong Kong is a good example where for pedestrians the access level is the first floor between buildings of 2 and 3 buildings rather than at street level, interfering with traffic and public transport systems. I'm running out of time. I want to give you time to quiz me, so I'm stopping there.
Thank you, Christopher. We'll see if there's any questions from the panel. No. I'm certainly interested in your suggestions about this old designation. So I wonder whether could you actually give us more information about where that old designation used to go?
Yes, I can dig that out for you.
Yes, and just get that to the Secretariat, because I'm very aware that those designations were uplifted quite often if they weren't going to be implemented within 5 years. So the planning process lost a lot of those strategic designations in the past. So yes, if you could provide some detail to us. Thank you.
We'll do that.
Grant.
And one final comment was that in terms of your governance structure, there was a time when I was as the first ever Professor of Transport Studies in New Zealand, was on your Transport Council's Committee on Transport until the government decided that only elected members could be on that. And so the benefit of any wisdom that I could have given you was sort of just gone.
Well, we're getting it from you now, so thank you very much. Grant, you had a final question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question following up on the designation
Yes.
If that whole designation wasn't able to be activated for whatever reason, do you think that a link off the, even though a link off the current main track that would run down past the airport,
Yes, I think you could. I think you could still do it now because since then the Northern Motorways corridor has been developed, and you could actually put the rail system into the middle of that corridor. And acquiring the land wouldn't be nearly so difficult.
Robbie, one last question. I know you struggle a bit with your hearing. Did you would have heard a lot of the guy before you submitted?
I've heard some of it. Yeah.
He reckons $40 to $50 million per kilometre. Do you think that is the range?
Well, I would minimise the amount of street running you have in an MRT system, if possible, because if it's in its own reserved corridor space, it's got right-of-way access. That's great. That's why I'm saying build over the top of it, because you can run underneath it and have stations that are free from the weather underneath the buildings. You can do that out in the countryside between here and Prebbleton, here and Lincoln. You can do it on the Northern Line as well. So the street running tram type MRT system, I would minimize that as much as possible and maximize use of the existing rail corridors.
Thank you very much, Christopher. And so great to hear from you and get your wisdom. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
All right, George, are you here? George Laxton. I think George is just going to come forward when Christopher vacates. So, well, George, and welcome.
Hello. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak to my submission. I'd just like to go over my submission just point by point, and anything that I left out and highlight things that are really important to me. So one, I do support the improved public transport system proposed in the draft spatial plan. Yes, and I'd like to add that the current focus on major routes running through towns means that there's many locations not ideally placed to allow for easy transfers.
George, could you is there a microphone there you could turn on?
It's green. Oh, so
Okay.
do I need to get closer?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that too loud now?
No, that's great. Perfect. Yeah.
Shall I start again?
Yes.
So one, do you support the improved public transport system proposed in the draft spatial plan? Yes, and I'd like to add that the current focus on all the major routes running through the town means that many locations are not ideally placed to allow for easy transfers. So for example, currently, it takes me a 20-minute walk to a bus stop to get a direct route to Sumner, which is ridiculous because it takes 20 minutes to drive there. So I hope in the new plan that that will be addressed and more destinations will be available to cater not just for those living along the main spine of the route. Also, I'm not sure I put this on my original submission, but I would prefer a rail system over a bus system. So just want to make that clear, like a light rail. So 1.2, do you agree that we should focus future development and investment around urban centres and transport corridors? Yes, and I want to highlight that we shouldn't only be focusing in these areas, but across the whole city. But it's a good place to start. Do you support the proposed strategy to maintain and enhance the natural environment within our urban areas? Yes, and I want to highlight the small pocket parks. I think they're amazing for community building, like gardens and stuff. So I think that should be part of the plan. Do you support the concept of green belt around our urban areas? Yes, as above. Do you agree with the approach to focus on these areas? So what I took from this, what I've written down here is basically, if private businesses are getting any sort of public funding or advantage provided to them by the public, I think they should be made to reinvest it back into the community in some way, from which they derive their success from. So I think it's really important that when we support private businesses, that the community gets a good return from it. Basically, they get a good investment back into it. So it's lots of money flowing both ways, or lots of value flowing both ways. I also think this is a great way to create large, well-planned communities. So taking large blocks of land and allowing private developers to basically design from the ground up, so we don't get all of these sort of townhouses that we're currently getting around town. There's a lot of them going up my street, and I think they're great, but we also need to be looking more like long-term about having public space built in, which is not really possible when private developers are having small plots of land. So I think there needs to be some more relationship building there to help that and basically make that work. 1.6, do you agree with the draft spatial strategy outlined above? Yes, I have nothing to add there. And do you have any other feedback on other aspects of the draft spatial plan? So I want to highlight that we should be focusing more on bike parking over car parking. I bike everywhere, I don't own a car. And so I think the future is basically micro mobility and biking everywhere for a lot of people. So get back on track. We need to set ourselves up for where most people can ride bicycles or use public transport to get places, or the majority of people. Also, the current solution of dockless e-scooters everywhere is solving a problem. However, I think there needs to be significant investment in the city-run initiative of bike share, and dockless scooters could go to a docked solution, I think would be better than having them everywhere, in my opinion. So this is especially important at like rail hubs along the main spine, having really high quality bike parking, like covered, protected, and in large enough areas, maybe even having like, security guards or something if there's a big enough demand for bike parking in that particular area. Something I noticed when I was in Japan a couple of months ago is a lot of the stations have huge racks of bikes, and there's like manned bike parking as well. So there's actually security guards there that help you where to go, put your bike and everything. But yeah, basically on that point, it just allows a larger catchment area when people can bike to the rail, to the light rail things. Yeah, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, George. Where do you live, George? Where do you live?
Waltham, sort of St Martin's area.
Okay, and you easily bike around?
Yeah. Once I get to the main bike networks, yeah. So it's a bit of a 5-minute bike to get to the current MCR routes, like in town but yeah, once I get onto that, then I can get pretty much anywhere in the city, except for the east, obviously, with the large gap.
Okay, but we'll take some questions. Grant.
Thanks very much for your presentation. You're mentioning at the beginning that you've just got back from Japan and you had some experiences there. And am I correct in what you're thinking is that along those transport corridors, we need to ensure high frequency interchanges?
Yes.
And the transfers that take place need to be easy?
Yeah.
Do you think that part of the experience you had was the journey from wherever you were staying or visiting to those? Was that an enjoyable journey in terms of public space?
Do you mean in Japan or in
Japan? I'm thinking, yeah.
So do you mean like
I suppose I'm thinking you're commenting on the need for public parks and green spaces and things like that. were they part of the experience in your journey to the transport node?
Not always, but yes, it was nice to go through in past parks. There was lots of we found lots of little places where you could just turn a corner, you find a little park, and you might have some food, you can sit down, and then the whole city just sort of fades away because you can't hear everything through the trees, and you just sort of, yeah. But in terms of like transport nodes, I wouldn't say there was too many of those places on the way. It was more just sort of slower speeds, which is quite common with the smaller streets and narrow street design in Japan.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Robbie, your travels around the city, how difficult is it for you to find a safe place to leave your bike? Because you may have biked in here today. Is it difficult?
In the center of the city, no, but anywhere sort of in the periphery, it is a lot harder. A lot of the time you find sort of either low quality bike parking or even if you do find it, but a lot of the time you don't find any bike parking at all, or it might be hidden away, tucked away in a sort of dark corner where you either don't find it or you don't really feel comfortable leaving your bike there. So you much rather want to have it sort of out where everyone can see it. So yeah, that's a problem. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Kate.
Thanks, George. You mentioned sort of an offhand comment at the end there about there's a gap between the cycle network and getting to the east. Can you explain that a bit more, please?
So I'm just talking about the sort of if I want to go to New Brighton, there is no safe cycle way there, basically, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. No MCR route, no major cycle route currently.
Thank you.
Yes, Gail's got a final question.
Think it'd be easier, do you think, if you could take your bike onto the transport and actually take it with you rather than having to leave it somewhere, or more convenient for that sort of last half K?
It might be, but what I would rather see is having sort of, like I mentioned, it's like a city bike scheme where once you get to your destination, if it is a long distance, you could jump on a city bike and bike to your destination. I think that would be more convenient instead of having to carry your bike onto the train. But it would be nice to have that as an option because sometimes you might need to take your bike on the train. But yeah.
Thank you.
George, thank you for coming. I know a few young people in Christchurch that bike everywhere. It's just the way they love moving in the city. So it's just been fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
All right. Diane, are you here? Let's come forward. You've got a presentation for us, Diane?
Oh, yeah. And I just pushed the thing to make the next one come up.
Yeah, I think you're in control.
Pardon?
I've just started the time, you can drive it yourself now.
Okay.
Yes, you can once the timer's going. So I think we're underway.
Okay. So, part of the reasoning for the GCSP is to sustainably control the population, but I'm wondering how this is going to be done. Will it be by limited accommodation built for families? No accommodation for larger families, extended families, generational families? This is something that was brought up at our table and suitable to our outdoor way of life, with room for storage of sporting and camping equipment, room to be able to have a work shed and or garage, something that is missing from what is already happening in the newly built apartments and things. Apartments can be a great place to live, but if it's cramped and you can hear every sneeze next door, it has a negative effect on a person's mental health. Mental health is a huge growing issue. People need space and lots of green spaces, where they live, not just a green belt that separates us from the country, but rather to bring the country into the city so people can grow their own vegetables and just have that space around. And also to have sponge zones. So housing intensification is already happening and needs much greater infrastructure than what already exists. So how will this be paid for? We already have a cost of living crisis, and the Reserve Bank estimate that homeowners will need to, on average, dedicate 22% of disposable income to service interest costs. That's massive just for interest costs. People cannot afford to buy food. How are they expected to pay higher rates to pay for all this? Is this ideology based, or is this something really coming from the people? Because most people have no idea about this. They're, yeah, and it's the ratepayers who pay the wages. Adding stress of higher rates to people's lives does not help with their well-being. Already there's a threat of an 18% rate rise to pay for what we already have, and where will it stop? It feels like those projects will bankrupt us. So New Zealand death rates are up and birth rates are down. So how are we going to not only pay for this, but what is the need if our population is on a downward trend? Population projections are all well and good, but it doesn't mean that they will actually happen. They're just projections after all, and to commit billions on a projection doesn't make any sense. I've heard many projections in my lifetime that have never come about. Where are the people coming from? Outside New Zealand, or from managed retreat, or both? Our physical infrastructure needs upgrading. Our service infrastructure is a mess, with many going overseas in certain. Higher numbers of children are going to hospital. This was on the news last night. Electricity prices are high. With more demand on the system, we're not in great shape to invite many more people to our city. And not everything is a council responsibility, but council is already struggling to find money to pay for necessary maintenance and to finish projects that already have. We don't need or want more debt. In Britain, many councils have filed for bankruptcy, and we don't want this to happen here. Plenty of essential jobs are in the countryside. Not all jobs are in the city. We need people to live in the countryside to grow food for us and others around the world, boosting our economy. Plus, every plant grown from grass to blueberry bushes sequesters CO2. Not everyone wants to live in the city, but there seems to be a plan to encourage everyone into cities. So I grew up in the 70s in a city of around 150,000. I biked, walked, and took the bus. It wasn't until the mid-80s that Vancouver had a rapid transit light rail system called SkyTrain. But this didn't replace the bus system. So I'm not against public transportation. Oops, that's the wrong one. Where's, oh shit, sorry. There we go.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm not against transportation. So this slide shows the buses there are electric. They have what we used to call rabbit ears that connect to wires above. This one's an extended bus that it's flexible and can turn corners. They can also change lanes within the traffic. I'm not making any money out of this. I don't have a company attached to this. So there you can see the SkyTrain. And it was deemed more economical to build above ground, and those nice apartments there paid top dollar not to look at a train, but they wanted to see the beach and everything. So they're not happy about it. And the little red thing in the bottom corner was my tech persons. They liked that fact that they put a tram and put wheels on it. But anyway, I digress. So there's many forms of transportation that can be used. But many people work throughout the city as part of their job, and their vehicle is necessary for their work. Think of a job. There are many jobs, from tradies to community health workers, that need to travel independently throughout the day. There will always be need for cars, and not all business can be done through public transport. Christchurch is a smart city, which means that planning is all about everything a person needs is within a 15-minute walk or bike ride from your home. Therefore, why do we need this transit corridor? If everything's within 15 minutes, there seems to be a contradiction here. So the decisions need to be based on what's good for the people of Christchurch, not based on data or ideology or from directions from central government through LGNZ and the SDGs. I also wonder why the focus is on the CBD quakes. So another submitter, not today, but previously, mentioned that planned rapid transit corridor is not rapid, as it is on ground level and will have interaction with people and cars across the travel corridor. And whether electric, rail, or bus, there isn't the power being created for both additional transportation and projected growing population. More wind and solar are not reliable or cheap. Fossil fuels are needed to get wind turbines going, and other sources are needed when the sun doesn't shine. And looking at line, but rail can also buckle. Where's the? It's not working.
Go up, I think.
The next, I'll put it on the next one. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here.
I think we're going up above. No,
up. Anyway, it just showed buckled railway lines. Okay, so that's good enough. So it can buckle from earthquakes, but there's also heat buckle. But the printing under there should be on a different slide, because this is, the picture is from an earthquake buckling. And
there's another image above too. So.
Oh, that was just another New Zealand, that's what happened in the earthquake. So, yeah.
Okay, all good.
Sorry, I'm not tech savvy. So New Zealand Rail, from somebody who works at New Zealand Rail that I know, is struggling to provide regular maintenance to their tracks as they are continuously engaged with emergency repairs, not enough people, equipment. Therefore, who will build the tracks if rail is chosen? People from overseas trained to build the tracks and then maintain them. Training, equipment, wages over the years of training before construction begins. Who will pay for this? Buses use existing roads, which is more environmentally friendly. The batteries of e-buses come with a huge negative and human environmental impact. So the next slide now with the buses. Oh God, there we go. Thank you. So as we can see, batteries are a fire hazard. That is why much of Europe has stopped using e-buses, because the fires from the batteries on an e-bus is tremendous. And so the tram buses that was in the previous picture of Vancouver, they're an alternate electric. It makes sense for them to create a park and ride bus system, express buses that uses the freeways, or they could use the existing rail. I understand there's a lot of zealots that get upset at the thought of park and ride, as they think that no car should exist at all, but that is not the reality in a free society. Not everyone lives next to a transport link, and they never will. All in all, with a small population base, we have the cost of living crisis, ratepayers unable to afford increases. Yep, that's right. And our debt, afford increases, and our council in debt, and struggling to maintain the infrastructure we already have and finish large projects. I feel the best thing for our future at this time is to improve the use of our bus service, introduce carpool lanes on major routes. In the future, when there is a greater population. Otherwise, I feel the council is truly putting the cart before the horse. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Diane.
Sorry for that technical.
I'm no technical wizard either, so I understand your pain. No, look, I think it was a very thoughtful presentation, and because you're giving quite an alternative view to some other people we're hearing from, so really appreciate that. Are you at university? Did you mention? Are you lecturing? What's your background?
Well, I'm Canadian, but I've lived here for 40 years or so. I lived in a lot of major cities around the States. I've experienced a lot of different transportation systems all over the place. There's still cars everywhere. There's still buses everywhere, whether there's underground rapid transit above, Chicago. They call it the L because it's elevated. And it doesn't look as nice as Vancouver's though.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Oh, Grant's
I
got
just
a-
wonder if we're able to get a copy of the notes.
Oh, the notes. Do you have written notes you could email
I
us?
do, and they sort of changed a bit as
Okay,
I can send a copy in. Is that all right?
please send it to the email address.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Georgia, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Georgia Brown. I'm speaking on behalf of Ross Clark. Mr. Clark is supportive of the recommendation of the officers at direction 3.5, which acknowledges that the concept of a green belt in Greater Christchurch needs to be explored in more detail, confirming that this will be undertaken as part of the development of the Blue-Green Network strategy. In addition, it is requested that the mapping of the highly productive land should also be considered as part of the detailing and mapping of a green belt. With respect to priority development areas, it is requested that greater acknowledgement is made in the final version of the spatial plan to indicate that there may be suitable alternative areas for greenfield development located in proximity to Christchurch City. The National Policy Statement for Urban Development requires planning decisions to contribute to well-functioning environments, and so the spatial plan should include directive principles about where or when this might be appropriate in order to provide for the well-functioning environment. For example, an appropriate location should include being connected to an existing urban and be accessible to existing transport infrastructure. Collectively, we recognise highly productive land needs to be protected for food production, and there is a need to focus urban development within the existing urban area, growing up rather than out. With respect to intensification, industrial development requires expansive greenfield sites, and thus does not have the same opportunity to grow up when compared to residential or commercial. The NPSUD seeks to remove barriers to development to allow growth up and out in locations with good access to existing services, infrastructure, and public transport. Therefore, the spatial plan should reflect this by providing clear direction towards how greater development capacity for industrial business growth is to be accommodated, particularly in Christchurch. The officer's report considers the demand projections and capacity estimates are reasonable and that there is additional capacity within industrial zones. However, based on research undertaken by CBRE, Christchurch has been going through a period of exceptional growth, most notably within the industrial sector. Decreased from 2.6% in June 2022 to 0.8% in December 22, with the largest reduction occurring in Grade A stock, where vacancy has dropped from 2.1% to 0.1%. This reduction has then led to a flow-on effect in land value, with large increases to date. CBRE commentating some land values have increased by 160% over the course of 3 years. Selwyn District has acknowledged the lack of available land in the wider region, given the recent rezonings of land in Wollaston. So while some areas of Greater Christchurch may have sufficient capacity, as alluded by the officers, Christchurch City is still clearly in need of additional industrial land, and therefore it is requested the spatial plan be enabling of and responsive to this need. An example of an area of land that could be suitable for greenfield industrial development in accordance with the NPS is the development site comprising 370 to 448 Johns Road, as depicted in the attached visualisation. This site is currently zoned rural urban fringe in the district plan. However, is in a location with good proximity to Christchurch City. Immediately west of the development site is existing industrial land, therefore enabling continued connectivity of this zone. The development site does not contain highly productive soils and furthermore would not be suitable for development of a more sensitive use such as residential or commercial due to its location within the airport noise contour overlays. Finally, the site is suitably located to existing transport infrastructure, including being in proximity to Christchurch International Airport and with direct access to State Highway 1. So in summary, as recognised within the officer's report, urban development Christchurch City and key infrastructure greater direction to enable sufficient flexibility to cater for sensible urban development proposals such as the one referenced above in order to contribute to greater.
Thank you, Georgia. Questions, panel? Robbie. Sorry, so that's near Isaacs, is it?
Just up from Smith Crane in construction.
Oh.
Yep, on the on State Highway 1.
And it has direct access, you say, onto the state highway?
It does, yep.
Has this been put forward into the district plan reviews previously as an area or not?
Not something that we've looked at beyond probably the last 12 months.
Okay.
So part of the land ownership has been within the last 5 years.
Yes.
The recent extension of it was within the last 12 months.
Yes.
So probably wind the clock back 12 months ago is when we started to
look at this.
To look at where to from here.
Yes. So we've been just in a general sense, we've been asked by a number of landowners to take the approach of identifying on maps potential greenfield growth areas.
Yep.
The officers are saying to us that's not needed because there's a list of criteria which they've developed, which if you tick the boxes going forward in terms of future planning, like district plans, regional plan reviews, RPS reviews, these areas should be enabled by those criteria. So for having the mapping done rather than sort of the list of criteria, is that your position?
Yeah, probably on both.
Both, yeah.
Just that it's directive that where proposals may be a sensible option, that there is a way through.
Yeah. Have you looked at those criteria that put forward by the officers?
Not in detail.
No.
Probably need to go back and
have
a look at that. Yeah.
Have a look at those, because that's the approach we're being suggested to, and there's some changes to those possible. So yes, just have a look at those. I think it'll be interesting. Gail, you've got a question?
Yes, I have. Look, so I'm just looking at a map. So does that site actually back onto Clearwater?
Not directly. There is a gap in between.
Right. Okay. Because I was just wondering about the wanting it for industrial, because I would thought maybe also that I don't know. Oh, no. It's open land, is it?
Currently it is. Yep.
It was. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate you attending and providing us this plan to look at. Will panel.
Thanks.